Well, good evening. It's 5 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. This is the Flagler County Board of County Commissioners, regular meeting, October 16th, 2023. If you'd all please rise and join me as we salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now, as we always do, we're going to observe a moment of silence where I'd like you all to think about our first responders, the men and women that serve our county, also the men and women in our armed forces that serve around the clock overseas and here ashore. And also, thanks for just being here in Florida. Moment of silence, please. Thank you. Well, we've got a couple additions to the agenda tonight. Addition number one is an amendment to use an agreement for the Gamble Rogers Memorial State Recreation Area for beach, dune renourishment, and beach access. It's requested by Amy Stroger. Commissioners?
Make a motion to add first amendment number one for the Gamble Rogers, use of Gamble Rogers to as 7I on consent.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to add Amendment 1 to the use agreement for Gamble Rogers Memorial State Park and make it 7I in the consent agenda. I'll open up to public comment. Anybody in the public have any comment on that? Seeing no one approach, I'll bring it back to the commission. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Hearing none. The second addition is a consideration of an agreement with Lutheran Services of Florida to provide community parametric services in support of a state-funded addiction stabilization program. It's requested by Chief Michael Tucker, Chief of the Fire Department.
Make a motion to add as 7J the agreement with the Lutheran Services of Florida to provide community paramedic services.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to consideration of an agreement with Lutheran Services of Florida. Anybody in the public wish to comment on this? Seeing no one approach, I'll bring it back to the commission. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. There's a couple modifications, 9A through 9D. Additional information for these items has been posted on the website. And modification 9E, Woodside at Ormond Station. Additional information for this item has been posted on the website. We still have a couple of board vacancies on the River to Sea TPO Citizens Advisory Committee. We have an opening for a citizen alternate. And River to Sea TPO Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, we also have an opening for a citizen. For further information or to apply, visit the Advisory Board Vacancies page at www.flaglercounty.gov. These positions will remain open until filled. We have one upcoming meeting. We have a regular commission meeting November 6th, Monday, November 6th at 9 a.m. Proclamations. First up, we have World Polio Day. I've asked Mr. Sullivan to read that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A proclamation of the Flagler County Board of County Commissioners recognizing October 24th, 2023 as World Polio Day in Flagler County. Whereas Rotary is a global network of neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers who unite to take action to create lasting change in communities across the globe. And whereas the Rotary motto, service above self, inspires members to provide humanitarian service, follow high ethical standards, and promote goodwill and peace in the world. And whereas Rotary in 1985 launched Polio Plus, and in 1988 helped establish the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, which today includes the World Health Organization, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, UNICEF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, to immunize the children of the world against polio. And whereas polio cases have dropped by 99.9% since 1988, and the world stands on the threshold of eradicating the disease. And whereas to date, Rotary has contributed more than $2.4 billion and countless volunteer hours in protecting nearly 3 billion children in 122 countries. And whereas Rotary is working to raise an additional $50 million per year, which will be leveraged for maximum impact by an additional $100 million annually from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And whereas these efforts are providing much-needed operational support, medical staff, laboratory equipment, and educational materials for health workers and patients. Whereas, in addition, Rotary has played a major role in decisions by donor governments to contribute more than $10 billion to the effort. And whereas there are over 1.4 million Rotary members in 46,000 clubs throughout the world that sponsor service projects to address such critical issues as poverty, disease, hunger, illiteracy, and the environment in their local communities and abroad. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Flagler County Board of County Commission that they hereby proclaim the week of October 24, 2023 as World Polio Day in Flagler County and encourage all citizens to join us and Rotary International in the fight for a polio-free world, accepted this 16th day of October 2023, attested Tom Bexley, Clerk of Circuit Court, and signed by our Chairman, Gregory Hansen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Wait.
And I will. There you go. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, thank you for this proclamation. My name is Roy Seeger. As you know, I'm the Director of Flagler Executive Airport, but tonight I come here as you as the club president for the Rotary Club of Flagler Beach. Again, we thank you for this proclamation. It's really important. As you know, so Commissioner O'Brien is a Rotarian in the county club. This is Debbie. She's my treasurer this year in our club. And as you know, Rotarians do a lot of great things around our community and also internationally. And this is pretty huge that one person started this that said, hey, we need to take this action and try to eradicate polio. And it was that little ripple ended up almost, I think to right now, I think the count is like there's only 12 cases of polio in the entire world. And I think those 2 cases are in like Afghanistan and places like that that's hard to get to people. So we do appreciate this proclamation, and we'd appreciate to get a picture with you guys.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. I'm gonna go.
As they're returning to their seats, we need a motion to approve the proclamation for World Polio Day.
Second.
So
It's been moved and seconded to approve the World Polio Day, October 24th. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion
Chairman,
passes.
I would say that for us more seasoned individuals, polio was an unbelievable, terrible thing that happened to this country back when I was growing up. I remember with the lungs that people had to go into, and
You have the sugar cubes?
yeah, I mean, it hit everybody, a little bit like COVID, and of course, medicine wasn't as advanced at that point. So I can remember at work, and there were always people and the families and friends who were afflicted with polio. So it's really a good thing that the world has done what it has to get a vaccine and keep it. Let's hope it doesn't kick up again in the future.
Our next proclamation is Celebrate Babies Week, and I'd ask Commissioner Pennington to do that.
Mr. Fay, This is a proclamation of the Flagler County Board of County Commissioners recognizing October 15th through the 21st of 2023 as Celebrate Babies Week in Flagler County. Whereas infants and young children thrive within nurturing environments and stable relationships that meet their developmental needs, and those who care for infants and young children are often in vulnerable states and require support and resources to help them care for their young children. And whereas Florida is committed to the belief that early relationships are the foundation for a young child's psychological, emotional, developmental, and physical well-being, each infant and young child must be nurtured and protected by one or more consistent, safe, loving caregivers. And whereas in the third week of October, Florida Association of Infant Mental Health and the FAIMH Northeast Central Florida chapter bring awareness to infant mental health and encourage the community to honor and celebrate the lives of infants and those who work with and on behalf of young children in our communities. And whereas the FAIMH Northeast Central Florida chapter includes partners from the broad Flagler County system of care that works with infants and families who come together bi-monthly to collaborate on strategies for education, training, professional development, reflective consultation, and resources in support of the needs of infants in our community. And whereas the data shows the need to address disparities through the creation of inclusive systems that provide equitable access to services and programs that support all infants, toddlers, and young children, and their families, and whereas there are several policy initiatives in Florida committed to improving outcomes for infants, toddlers, and young children with a focus on collaboration and partnership. And whereas through intentional community outreach, professional development, networking, fundraising, social action, and policy awareness efforts, babies and their families and those who personally and professionally support them are honored and celebrated. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Flagler County Board of Commissioners that we hereby proclaim the week of October 15th through 21st, 2023 as Celebrate Babies Week in Flagler County, and we encourage all citizens to recognize the nurturing resources needed in the lives of our infants and their families. And we commend the Florida Association of Infant Mental Health, Northeast Central Florida chapter for providing this critical awareness and support in our community. This has been adopted the 16th of October, 2023, attested by our clerk, Tom Bexley, and our chair, Gregory Hansen.
So much. You did a beautiful job reading
Oh,
it.
thank you.
Mr. Fay?
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
Well,
You're welcome to add anything if you'd like.
I really just think that what we're trying to do by getting this proclamation in is to really help the community understand that there are individuals working within the Flagler County care system, looking at the needs of infants and young children, and it hasn't always been a priority, just given the nature of the community and the developments, but it's going to become more of a priority as we go forward. So we want to be sure that we're keeping this issue on the front burner in front of policymakers, and that we're having this ongoing conversation and dialogue to make sure that we do have the resources available to support our young infants and children and their families so that they can become productive members of society.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Would you like to have a picture with us?
I could do it.
Come on up that way.
Come on
I'll
way
go
up
ahead and
this
make
way.
the motion. Gentlemen, I'd like to make a motion to make this proclamation of the Flagler County Board of County Commissioners recognizing October 15th, 21st as Celebrate Babies Week in Flagler.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the Celebrate Babies Week, October 15th through the 21st, 2023. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. There you go, beautiful.
That doesn't mean I'm going to read them all.
I think he just signed it. Next, we have a presentation, the Flagler County Audit Report for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2022. This is requested by Tom Bexley, our Flagler County Clerk and Comptroller. And he's not coming up here. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Frank Mason. I'm the engagement partner with Carr, Riggs & Ingram, and we're happy to be here tonight to present your audit to you. With me is Brett Stone, who is the senior manager that is in charge of this audit, and Shanoa Murch, who's one of our seniors as well. And we're very happy to be here. Brett's going to kind of go through our reports and at a very high level and Thank you for having us tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to present the results of our audit.
Could you move over to the mic, please? Thanks.
Sorry. We'd also like to thank management and staff of the county and clerk's offices for the cooperation during this and assistance during the audit process. We'll start on page 218 of the financial statements, which presents a summary of your fiscal year 2021-2022 audit results, including opinions on the financial statements and major federal programs and state projects, which were all unmodified, otherwise known as clean opinions. Clean opinions were issued for the governmental activities, business-type activities, each of the three major funds, which consisted of the General Fund, Airport Fund, and the Capital Projects Fund, New Sheriff's Operations Center, and the aggregate remaining funds. Also in this summary on page 219, we reported two audit findings. The first is related to internal controls over payables cutoff, and the second was related to a finding in federal single audit specific to the SAFER grant. Those question costs were discovered by the county during an internal review and corrected in the current fiscal year. And corrective actions have been taken to address both of those findings going forward. Back again on page 218, the summary lists the two major federal programs and three state projects that were subject to single audit. Moving on to our annual reports that are required by the rules of the Auditor General, they start on page 223. First is the management letter. We're required to assess the financial condition of the county as of the end of the fiscal year. We determined that you did not meet the definition of experiencing a financial emergency or deteriorating financial condition as defined in the Florida statutes. The GFOA recommends the total amount of unassigned and assigned general fund balances be enough to cover 2 months of general operating expenditures of the next year. And based on your 2022 expenditures, those available fund balances provide sufficient coverage to meet the GFOA recommendation. We're also required by the state to comment on whether any prior year findings have been corrected. However, as stated at the bottom of page 223, there were no findings in the prior year financial audit report. The report on page 225 relates to our testing of compliance with Florida Statute Section 218415 regarding investments. We did not find any material noncompliance, and as such, we reported in our opinion the county complied in all material respects with the statute. Last report is on page 226. This report is also required by the state, which attests to the county's compliance with certain sections of Florida Statutes 365 regarding authorized expenditures and uses of E911 funds. Again, we did not find any material noncompliance, and our report states in our opinion that the county complied in all material respects. And that concludes our summary. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to try to answer those.
So we did all right.
Yes.
That's all we need to know.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can remember a couple of times on the date we submitted and got reports
We were a
back.
little late this time.
Yeah, so do we do okay on that this time, or just,
Well, we got a letter asking us where it was,
okay.
and we've sent it in now, so that's good. That's
So
good.
is it a month, 2 months, 3 months? I mean,
How late are we this year? 2 months?
I believe it was 3 months.
3 months?
okay.
June. I think it's June. Okay, well, thank you all very much. I know it's a tough job, and I was really pleased to see the cooperation across the board that you got. So it's a credit to our staff. They do a good job, and you guys did a good job. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
just wanted to just follow up on your comments and say I've been serving, this is my 7th year, and for the most part, we've always had clean audits. I think we've advanced by the adoption of some of the things we've done with our strategic plan. We're a more transparent county and local government than we've ever been in terms of our financial information that's out there for the public. And I really want to recognize and thank the clerk for his teamwork and his effort, and Ms. Parker and her team, at the clerk's office, and our financial folks too as well, our budget department, our financial services department. I think they've demonstrated a lot of good teamwork back and forth, and we have the checks and balances on the clerk's side and the work that y'all do. So obviously wish it wasn't a couple months late, but those things happen, and can forgive that, given the fact that we're clean and with no findings of note, and appreciate the hard work that y'all have done, and would move adoption of the financial statements.
Second.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Accept it.
Accepted.
So there was a motion.
So we didn't have to do that?
No.
Yeah,
I think we can agree to accept the report. You don't have to move.
I don't think we have to do it.
Yeah.
yeah, I guess it's already filed, so.
It's already filed.
All right.
It's filed
Okay.
with the state.
Yes, sir.
Next is community outreach. This 30-minute time period has been allocated for public comment on any consent agenda item or topic not on the agenda. Each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes to address the commission. Speakers should approach the podium, identify themselves, and direct comments to the chair. The podium is now open. Don't be shy.
I was going to let somebody else go first, but my name is Alan Sandiford. I live at 14 Treetop Circle. And I'm here to speak about something that's not on the agenda tonight. And this is concerning a 20-acre parcel that's currently zoned agricultural, low-density, rural residential that adjoins our neighborhood. There's an application, a couple applications out to change the zoning from rural residential agricultural to high density, to put in a 3 and 4, 20-unit apartment complex, 200-unit apartment complex, 3 and 4 stories, which would be butt right up against the side of our little subdivision, of which we just had, the shopping center come take all the trees down right up to the back side of our other side. We're still going through that with a 3-story storage unit that's coming in there and other commercial things going there. But right on the other side now, they're trying to get this rezoned so they can put in this 200-unit apartment complex, which will be right up against the other side of the back of the houses and the golf course of Magnolia Estates. And what I wanted to say about it, it has to do with the infrastructure and the compatibility with the area. And just from my experience, concerning the density of the traffic on Old Dixie Highway and the general area, that with local driving day by day, when you're trying to come out of Plantation Bay, there's some commercial things across the street, you're trying to go over to the Publix, get past the I-95 interchanges. Old Dixie Highway is different from the other highways and the other interchanges because it's only 2 lanes, 1 in each direction with no traffic lights, whereas all the other, places where you have interchanges with 95 are obviously 2 lanes in each direction with divided highway. But it's becoming more and more dangerous just with the amount of volume of development that's already going on in the area with Plantation Bay and the things that are going on in Volusia County and up on Old Kings Road. There's still a whole lot to go before those are finished. And so I would say that the roads are just not up for this because there's been a lot of near misses and hits and accidents coming out of Plantation Bay and trying to get out of the shopping center. The speed limit's 45. A lot of people want to go 50, and it's pretty treacherous. But I want to say that let's see. I know that our area is split between Flagler and Volusia County. That's why it's a little challenging to get a unified vision for a current future quality of life result. But less than 1.5 miles to our east, Old Dixie Highway leads to Beulah Creek State Park. Beulah Creek, North Peninsula State Park, and on narrow 2-lane roads that wind to the east, they often flood and become impassable.
Thank you very much.
Secure the future of those parks.
Thank
and
you.
the quality of life for that. Thank you.
Hi, Jane Gentile, Youth Plantation Bay. I'm a neighbor of Alan's. The one thing Alan was reading, the property is not zoned low-density residential. Adam Engel sent incorrect information to our homeowners association. Michael Chimento sent out incorrect. I have spoken with the property appraiser The property is zoned timberland. It is zoned agricultural. It allows one home per 5 acres. It's zoned timberland, and the tax bill, which is right on Jay Gardner's fabulous website, agricultural classification, all taxes. I sent you all municode.com confirming that agricultural zoning has nothing to do with low-density residential. You're allowed one home per 5 acres because timberland was really for farmers, for people to be able to farm and have a home. So the whole application is a fraud to begin with. This whole application, which was tabled illegally as well, because I sat on a zoning board, and I pray to God this doesn't go to court, because I could testify as an expert witness, as a licensed real estate broker since '86, a member of the National Association of Realtors. You don't go from agricultural, one house per 5 acres, to 200 homes and send out irresponsible letters to homeowners associations, irresponsible notes, and shame on the planning board. I'm not a board member. I did my homework. I looked up Municode. I looked up Jay Gardner's website. Do you know that this parcel is paying only $51 tax to Flagler County? Their total tax bill for the whole year, $91.33, $51 to the county. They had 655 feet of easement abutting Old Dixie Highway mode. That costs more than the $51 we got. There is no level of services, no parks, no schools, no shopping. You don't tell somebody to go shopping in another county. This is not only inconsiderate zoning, this whole thing is a fraud, and I'm saying this now because this whole application has to go in the garbage. It shouldn't even go before the planning board, and shame on the planning board member. Jay Gardner is one of the best constitutional officers. Anything you want to know, he's got on his website, and one house per 5 acres is not low-density residential. This is a scam, and Adam should be fired.
Thank you, Jane. Next speaker.
I'm Howard McCarter at 3699 Citrus Avenue in the Mondex. You guys come along and dug out all the swells. You didn't clean out the culverts. So all you did was make bigger mosquito ponds. The water does not run. It's just laying up there like it did before. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you, sir. Yes, Richard.
Good evening. My name's Richard Hamilton. I live in Island Estates. I'm not sure I wanted to come up here after those couple of comments, but looking at the agenda today, and I'm going to speak not on the agenda, but made me think back about a month ago we started in the comprehensive plan update, and I started thinking, well, 35 years from now, I'm going to be 100. Hope I'm still here then. But what I did is I went and took a drive around the county to try and remember what was it that attracted me here in the first place. And it was basically 3 things. One, it was unlike coming from Connecticut, where I was, it was the A1A, the beach, the water, the views of the ocean. It was, secondly, it was the recreational facilities here on the Intracoastal, the kayaking, and the trails, and so on. And thirdly, it was the trees and the greenways that weren't just on the A1A, but were Route 100, Route 1, also very different from what we're used to up in the Northeast. So when I saw your agenda today, it suddenly struck me that what you're talking about, you're dealing with a whole lot of mundane, routine issues. And I feel sorry for you for having to go through this. We've got a long evening perhaps ahead of us. I hope not. But remember that what you're doing here is potentially affecting that vision we have for 35 years from now. Because what attracted me 35 years ago, and that, I counted back, it was about 35 years ago that I first discovered Flagler County, is still here today, and it will be here in 35 years. So you've got a number of items. We're just going to go into a presentation, parks and trails. That's very important, not just for now, but for the future and for your comprehensive plan. You have on your consent agenda the beach management study. That's also important because of the preservation it will afford to the A1A, particularly in Flagler Beach and other areas, as well as the protection of the dunes and the nourishment. I hope, by the way, it doesn't preclude continued discussion of perhaps seawalls and things and protecting certain homes. But and then the third item later on, and I'll leave it for that, I may or may not speak, is the zoning impacts. You've heard a couple of comments here about zoning impacts and how they affect trees, how they affect that greenway and that green space. So I hope the issues that you have later on zoning, particularly on the E1A, are resolved correctly. But I just wanted to think about that. The agenda here is important, not just for tonight and for today, but how we shape our comprehensive plan going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next speaker. Good evening.
Evening, George Mayo, Palm Coast. When I was here at the last meeting, I brought up a item where a contractor in the city of Fort Lauderdale were scammed out of $1.2 million in a billing issue with the contractor that was false. After the meeting, I spoke to the IT director, Matt, and he said they have procedures in place so that this wouldn't happen here in Flagler County. And yet, a day or two later, I see on the news where Flagler School Board was a victim of basically the same similar scam. Sheriff Staley came on the news a couple days later and said he's not sure that they will be able to recover that money. My question is, has the county administrator or the county commission been contacted by the school board that if they cannot recover that money, will we be asked as taxpayers to help replace that $700,000? I know different meetings, we're always talking about different items we would like to get. We don't have the money. Where can we get the money for this, that, or something else? So if they haven't and they do, are you willing to maybe possibly replace this money for their building over there at Matanzas? Will it be on the taxpayers? And did the school board not get the memo after the meeting and fall victim to the same similar scam? So I'm just curious on what your thinking is on that. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, any comments on the consent agenda? Mr. Sullivan?
None.
Mr. Dance?
Yes, sir.
Ms. Pennington?
No, sir.
Sir?
No, sir.
And I have none.
It's O'Brien.
7 years. All right, it's time to deal with the consent agenda. Mr. O'Brien, anything you'd like to pull off the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Pennington?
No, sir.
Mr. Dance?
No, sir.
Ms. Sullivan?
Nope.
And I have none. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll make that motion that we approve the consent agenda, including now items 7I and 7J.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda with the addition, including the additions of 7I and 7J. Anybody in the audience wish to comment on that? Seeing no one approach, bring it back to the board. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes. On to item 8A. which is a Parks Master Plan presentation. And Mike Lagasse, I understand, is ill. They won't be here tonight. So Jorge.
Good afternoon, Chairman, Commissioners. Yeah, Mike is ill today. We have our Park Master Plan presentation by Mr. Art Thatcher from Barry Dunn, and I'll leave you with Mr. Thatcher.
Art Thatcher, Barry Dunn, Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity again. We're here tonight to kind of give you the draft of the master plan and go into some of the priorities that have been developed through this planning process. Just to kind of highlight where we are, we're in this action planning part. You can see I've highlighted we're in the draft Parks, Recreation, and Facilities System Plan phase of the project. So just to kind of recap, we did extensive public engagement. We used a mixed method approach to our public engagement. We did a statistically valid survey, intercept surveys. We did focus groups, public meetings, held stakeholder interviews, leadership interviews. We also had an interactive website, Social Pinpoint, did some online surveying, and had a social media presence as part of this information gathering. So our public engagement, we were here in February, did involve the staff as part of the process, held 8 focus groups and 18 leadership interviews. Those focus groups, leadership interviews, and then that public meeting, we had 32 people attend that. So one of the things that came out of the focus groups and that engagement was kind of priorities for the next 5 years. And you can see kind of conservation and wildlife protection, funding, staffing, new facilities, docks, disc golf, those things, and diversity of your park components were kind of those top 5 priorities that had come out of that process. We used that engagement process to develop our survey and also to develop our social pinpoint. So our online engagement with Social Pinpoint, we had 305 unique users overall. We had an ideas wall we had 392 different ideas that were posted on the wall. We did a budgeting tool where we provided a list of projects, and people could divide up $200 onto those projects. And we had a park-specific or a trail-specific forum that we had 48 people interact with. And then we had a mapping tool where citizens could go in and put pins on a map and provide comments. And so we had 213 different interactions with that tool. I provided you with a little more detail earlier. So some of the main themes that came out of the Social Pinpoint, out of that engagement, trail and sidewalk improvements, park expansions and amenities, kayak launches and waterway access, completion and extension of existing trails, natural site preservation, the saltwater channel dredging, historic site preservation, and then a comprehensive dune plan were some of the top themes that came out of that. Again, we developed a survey. We did a statistically valid random sample mailing. We mailed out 4,500. We got a little bit better than a 10% return, which is what we reached for. We had 471 returned, and then we had an additional 1,085 open link surveys that were returned from the community at large. So some of the key findings from the survey: most frequently used facilities, your beaches, your parks, trails, and pathways are the most frequently used. About a quarter of the respondents use them at least once a week. The amenities that are used when visiting your parks and visiting the parks and recreation facilities, those top 5 are your nature walkways, restrooms, the boardwalk, overlooks and the piers, your trails, and then ocean-based recreation, that kayaking, surfing, fishing. Areas of greatest improvement, and of those top 4, parks and open space, walkways and trails, nature preserves and reserves, and then amenities at your parks. The fourth was what would increase the participants' use, and so those top 5 were improved communication, additional lighting, additional facilities and amenities, more shade and better condition and maintenance. And then the final, we asked about priorities over the next 5 years. Improving your existing facilities and amenities was number one, followed by additional trails and pathways, nature-based recreation, more senior programs, and adding more parks.
Could I ask you a question there?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell what part of the county people responded from? Did we get the whole county participating?
Yes, we did.
We did.
Yeah, so if you remember in an earlier presentation, I showed the map of we divided the county into districts, into 5 districts.
Yeah.
And then I also showed the response rate that we had. I think if I remember correctly, I think 2 and 3 had about 30% each, and then the other districts broke up the other 70%.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. If you remember, we also had our staff come out and we did an inventory and level service analysis. So we went to all of your parks and looked at not only the park itself, but we looked at the components within those. We GIS those, and we were able to provide a customized level of service analysis that looked at equity, distribution, access, gaps, those things. And so we're able to provide recommendations that are evidence-based, and it helps us to prioritize our action items and to kind of look at some of that low-hanging fruit. And so this is a summary of the inventory. You can see we inventoried the city parks as well as the county and then some of the other service providers. And you can see through the inventory that you have the county has 8,343 acres of parkland with 244 components within each of those. And so, as I mentioned, we do a quality score. We score them a 1, 2, and a 3. A 1 means that it's that the component is not functioning the way it was designed to function, so it may need to be replaced or repaired. A 2 is that it's functioning the way that it was designed, may just need some general maintenance, and a 3 is that it's functioning above, and so it is, maybe a brand new piece of playground equipment you put in, a new picnic shelter. And so we're able to pull all of those 1s through the database and begin to look at how we can address those, and kind of that's that low-hanging fruit to kind of make your immediate kind of responses to those needs. And you can see this is broken out by the city, the county, and then other service providers. So additionally, Miller Legg was here.
Just,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just one
Yeah, go
question
ahead,
about
Dick.
that last slide. And that is that some of our schools provide fields outside of the school activities. I'm thinking where they have the youth football at Rimfire School, and they're fixing that. And then a number of the communities have their own recreation facilities, such as where I live in Grand Haven. How do you kind of take that into consideration when you do a study like this?
So typically when we look at schools, we discount schools, the recreation components at schools, we discount them by 50% because they're not available all the time to the community. And in some cases, the schools are fenced and locked. And so we discount that 25% because they may rent those fields that are locked to the general public to a recreation group, to like youth football or youth Little League baseball or something. So we do account for that, but we don't. And so as we do our level of service, it lowers the access to those components. And as far as the like homeowners association parks, we do look at those and we account for those, but we don't inventory those individual parks. So we don't inventory the components within those. We do look at them, and as we did our heat maps, remember the heat maps that we did? As we do those heat maps, we do account for the HOAs providing service to those residents around them. And so Miller Legg was here also with us, and they did our trails assessment. They went out and looked at all your trailheads, All of your road crossings went to, road the majority of the trails, and provided us with an overall assessment of the trail system. You have an extensive system that expands over 125 miles of trails within the county. You offer a variety of different options, from biking, hiking, and horseback riding. Many of the trails are interconnected. The trail system is connected to several parks and recreation areas. The amenities along the trails, such as restrooms, seating, bicycle maintenance stations, picnic shelters, and those things. And then some of those are, they emerged into natural habitat, your pine rocklands, your hardwoods, and those things. And so they're very beautiful and experiencing. And so we take all of that data and we begin to look at what are those recurring themes. And so the recurring themes that we saw through all of that data collection, maintaining and making upgrades to your existing parks, beaches, facilities, and amenities, additional access to water, developing a new athletic complex, adding additional restrooms along trails, athletic fields, and playgrounds, developing more rectangle and diamond fields, preserving open space, beaches, conservation lands, wildlife, and heritage sites, developing new facilities and amenities, continuing current and developing new collaborations. And we've talked a lot about the collaboration between the county and Palm Coast in developing this master plan, continuing that and including the schools in that, developing additional trail connectivity and expanding on your current system, improving communication about offerings and existing facilities and activities, and then developing additional programs specifically identified were seniors, active adults, teens, after-school programming, and outdoor recreation. And so we take all of that and we begin to develop goals. And so we developed 4 goals, if you remember from my last presentation. We developed 4 goals and then objectives to address each of those. And so the first goal is to invest in the current infrastructure and address your aging facilities. And we had 14 different objectives in that. And just briefly, maintaining your existing facilities, renovating and replacing outdated and failing facilities, expanding your parks and open space, exploring opportunities to add new trails for walking and biking, developing additional outdoor recreation facilities, providing improved signage to make it easier for citizens and visitors, exploring opportunities for non-traditional sports and activities, developing new amenities at existing parks, adding indoor recreation space, upgrading your comfort and convenience and customer service amenities. Those are your restrooms, your water stations, and those things. Creating new park identities in existing and new parks, addressing current and future needs for athletic fields, gathering feedback and data on facility usage, and then monitoring your ADA access to parks, trails, beaches, and facilities as you're redeveloping and improving those facilities. So the second goal was to improve and enhance programming and outreach. And we had eight objectives in that. Improving your developmental marketing and communication, utilizing technology to improve customer service, exploring opportunities for non-traditional recreation, continuing to grow programs and service accessible to citizens of all abilities, continuing to address recreational programming and activity needs for the community, enhancing special event programming, partnering with other providers when possible to develop programs and services, and then gathering feedback and data on program participation. Our third goal was to improve your organizational operations. So staffing appropriate to meet current demand and maintain established quality of service, re-examining and documenting your departmental policies, procedures, and processes, and then reviewing your current operational agreements and how they benefit the department as well as the other service providers to maximize potentials. And then the final was increasing financial opportunities. So exploring those additional funding through the pursuit of grants and philanthropic opportunities, and then exploring, developing, and implementing a cost recovery and pricing philosophy and practice. And so, as I said, we pulled action items for each one of those. One of the things that I did, in the full document, in the full draft, you have all of those action items. We were asked to provide a kind of a top 10. And so we looked at, all of the data collected and kind of where the greatest need was, consulted with staff, and these were kind of the top 10 that we came up with. And you see the majority of them come out of that first goal, which is your facilities, and then some from the second, third, and fourth. And so in the action table, you see we had we also identified who those lead organizations are. And so kind of the detail is a little bit more in the document itself, but addressing the low-scoring components and amenities from the GRASP Atlas, those are those ones that I showed earlier. Developing a staffing plan is recommended through the maintenance analysis that we conducted. Maintenance projects and annual maintenance needs should be funded on a regular schedule through your CIP and through other opportunities. Developing park-specific master plans. So some of the parks have gotten to the point where they may need to be new master planned so that they can be currently up to speed and up to what the community desires. And so there's an opportunity down the road, and this is kind of one of those midterm projects, but as you begin to update some of those parks, you may want to consider master planning the full park itself. Working with developers to include parklands for residents, continuing to work with the city of Palm Coast and other municipalities to develop and expand your bike paths and your walking trails, developing non-traditional sports and outdoor recreation amenities at existing and new parks. As opportunities arise and facilities become available, develop and implement additional programs for people with special and unique needs. As parks, beaches, trails, and facilities are upgraded, and implementing the plan, ensure that staffing levels are maintained to meet the current performance standards, and then additional funding opportunities that should be explored through land and water conservation funds, transportation funds available through the federal and the state government. And so what I did was I looked at some of those low-scoring components that we had, and Miller Legg gave us some capital costing and of general range of what it would take. Kind of as we look at this, where it's a little bit more detailed in the plan itself. Currently, you're undergoing repairs now at the Splash Park, at the James Holland Memorial Park. Sorry. Indian Trails Sports Park, the playground, and kind of looking at the playground is small and could be upsized to provide access to more different age groups. Kind of looking again at the T-ball field, looking at the opportunity to build some diamond fields there at that sports complex. James Holland, there's no concessions there, so looking at providing that as an amenity to the park users. The community center is another one to add access to, and then the Ralph Carter Park. And then we also pulled the counties as we kind of look at that. And so kind of looking at water access at Burlow and at Flagler, the Eco Discovery Center, and I'm looking at providing public access to the water there, at Graham Swamp and at Haw Creek, trailhead improvements there. Looking at Hidden Trail, kind of looking at upgrading those horseshoe courts there. Also the basketball courts, looking at resurfacing and painting those. The Lake Destin boat ramp, water access. Currently it's an unimproved boat ramp, so making improvements to the boat ramp there. Looking at adding a loop trail at Moody, Homestead Park, And then at Wadsworth, looking at adding to the playground there, upgrading the basketball courts, and then adding, some additional playground materials in another area within that park.
Yes, Ms.
On
Sullivan.
Wadsworth Park, I believe we're adding pickleball courts.
Yeah, we're adding pickleball courts,
Yes.
They're not there yet, so.
That's right.
but it's in the budget.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and that's why it's not on this list, because
Okay.
we know it's
right.
in your capital, it's in your capital budget, and it's already been funded.
Right, okay.
And then these were just some of the other service providers. We did this not to think that you all would take on any of these projects or that the city would take on any of these, but if those other service providers were interested, we could provide them. They could see in the report that there were some capital needs there. And so we're kind of in the final phases now of the plan. You've got the draft. Staff has got the draft and are reviewing that. Once we get feedback from that, I have a presentation tomorrow morning to the City Council in Palm Coast. Once I get feedback from everyone, we'll finalize the plan. We'll send it to our marketing folks and format it, put in the pictures and upgrade the graphs and those things and provide you with the final plan. So I'm open to any further questions that you may have.
Commissioners, any questions?
Well, go ahead.
Ms. Sullivan?
Just, I was paying attention, but on the dog parks, we just, at Holland Park, they put in very nice dog park, and we just upgraded our dog park on Roberts Road and at Wadsworth. And there's shade, we included shade there too. So sometimes I think, the obvious stuff gets missed, like the pickleball courts we're putting in and stuff like that. So in a way, I don't have any problem with what you've presented. It's just, people come at this, like you were saying, communication. So I think it's important for us to go after that and make sure people understand there are things that exist now that are working and have been improved.
There are improvements we're making every year on all
Absolutely.
this stuff.
Yes, and that's the great thing about what you all have done and what the city is doing is that you're continuing with your CIP and you're continuing to make those improvements while we're going through this process. And so it does keep the community engaged, seeing those increases as things move on. And as far as dog parks, and we do look at those and we do recommend those, but we don't have specific locations for those, just based on your redevelopment and so other than where you have already identified them.
Mr. Dance?
Back on page 2.
Yes, sir.
Turn that on. We're on the fourth step.
Yes, sir.
Action plan. So in layman's terms, explain the draft facility system plan. That's the stage we're at. So what is it that you are doing at this stage? Is it the entire presentation that followed, or is there, I think from the layman perspective, what is that?
So that is the master plan that was written, and a draft was provided to staff, and I assume that it was provided to you as well.
It's just that, again, it's the language sometimes can be confusing.
So the reason that we call it a draft plan is that it hasn't been presented to you and you haven't had a chance to review it and then provide comment before we provide a final plan.
All right. Under GRASP, obviously, again, you've used GPS and different technology to rank so that we know how the existing parks, where they're deficient or where they're meeting expectations. Is under the trails component, did we identify the missing links, or is that an area yet using technology and GPS where we've developed value-based, right, the most impact for the least amount of money to complete trail segments that are missing?
So we have identified some areas where connectivity is be advisable, but not to increase land costs or those things. We don't identify, if it's private property, we don't identify specific pieces of property to put trails on.
Well, that's what I'm saying. For a lot of it is, where we have right of way.
Yes.
Those are the low hanging fruit, if
Right.
you will, where we
Yes.
don't have to acquire right of way. So I'm hoping by the time we get through with this, as far as trails go, we'll have a priority based system
sir.
of the links that are missing, and will make the biggest impact for the least amount of dollars.
Pennington?
That's it.
Mr. O'Brien?
Just one thing, I would hope that as we adopt this and move forward, that as the administrator builds the CIP each year, we identify those projects in here that we're going to prioritize and tie it back to this, so that we know we're making progress, I guess, is my thoughts.
Yeah,
So,
think
other than that, appreciate a very, very comprehensive plan, and be curious to see how the city views it as well. So,
Mr. Dance?
Is there any other opportunities for public input, or are we through with all public input at this point? Other than these meetings?
This is kind of the end of my part of the public engagement piece. I mean, we can, if you want to, once we finish the draft and pull the full document together, some communities have put it on their website for public comment.
So
Right,
we still
prior
have
to
the
adoption?
If residents are going through this plan and send us comments, or we have the opportunity at a meeting like this for the public to speak on it, those things can still be inputted if we
Yes, sir.
relay that to you.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Wouldn't hurt. We're not making a motion, right, at
Yeah,
this stage?
There's no motion. There's no vote. Next item is 8B, review advisory board comments. The Board of County Commissioners review the advisory board requirements and the tally of appointees' responses to the county residency and registered voter inquiries, and take action as deemed necessary.
Al? I'll kick it off. We'll just start in.
I don't think
Start the
we,
music,
I don't
you
think
know,
we
da, da,
originated
da,
this,
da,
but
da,
I'm
da.
perfectly willing to address it with you, and it has to do with a consistency in the way you treat your advisory board members. And so we've pointed out to you that historically we have tried to assure that the individuals that serve on the advisory board are registered voters, are residents of Flagler County. There have been some questions about that in the past. I'm not going to go into that. But they did a complete review of everyone. I think there were a few that ended up not being verified as registered voters, and there was one whose status was uncertain. So it gives you, as board members, an opportunity, particularly as we grow, that you create the kind of platform that you want for the people who come forward to help formulate public policy. Some of these, as you know, there are various statutory requirements. Contractor Review Board, for example, Tourism Development Council. So
those are not necessarily areas where you're being asked, hey, do we change the underlying requirements for each of those slots? It's you're looking at, for those, the registered residing within Flagler, you may not think that a person residing in Flagler needs to be a registered voter. We don't know how you feel about that. Now, there may be other aspects. From time to time, I've had conversations with board members where they thought for certain kind of positions, it was important to know the social media profile of the individual and what they were saying about governance and how would they treat this very important responsibility, because while they don't represent the county, say in the way that I represent the county or Heidi or you, they nevertheless are part of the face of Flagler County. So I don't know that there's been any specific recommendation. I think it was requested by you that we present this to you, and it's now here for whatever discussion and outcome that you might want.
So I'll go ahead and kick off.
Go ahead,
Yeah, because
yeah.
I know Chairman Hansen, we've talked about this in the past, and I think this is one of several reasons why this isn't before us, is that we are concerned about having people on our boards that are not, have a vested interest in the decisions that they're making, just residents in general. I think it's important that they're all registered voters. I think it's important that they live in the county. And the reason this came up in the beginning was that we have a member, and I know Chairman Hansen brought it up as well, we've been reported back that we have a member on our planning board that isn't technically homesteaded in the county, they're homesteaded elsewhere. And our code specifically at 2.02 states that, not only do they have to be an elector, a voter at all times, and a full-time permanent resident, they have to be able to provide a valid homestead exemption and maintain it throughout the term of office. And so we've, found that to be an issue, and we've not really addressed it as a board. We haven't talked about it at all. That we have a member sitting on that planning board that is, while maybe living here in a rental, is homesteaded in another county, which the state of Florida, will tell you that that is your permanent residence, that you made a good faith effort to say if you're homesteaded there, that that's where you live. So I think that's how we got here initially. And then two, we've occasionally seen some on social media take stances, on the board that's not necessarily been very kind. But so I have a major issue with the way it is, and I think that we all need to come to some sort of agreement that we need to revise the boards to ensure that, one, they're all registered voters, and two, that they're all real residents of Flagler County as demonstrated by homestead, which is what our code says. So I know that there's a couple of members on the other boards that are not voters, and I don't know what kind of actions we want to take there. But I do have a major issue having a resident making planning decisions that affect our land code, but don't technically reside here per state of Florida statute. And I watched that old video when you swore that person in, and you actually had to make they were at large, they lived in, Palm Coast, and you had to make a special exception just because they didn't actually live in unincorporated county. I think you didn't actually know that they weren't actually homesteaded here as well. So I think it's important. It concerns me that board might be procedurally defective, which could open us up in the future to challenges on decisions made. And I think that we need to come to a consensus on our boards that everyone is registered voter and homesteaded in our county.
And I think we have the capability in our staff to do that,
Yeah.
to make sure that we do that. Donnie, you look worried?
There's a difference between homestead and resident. How can you require someone to be, so you would rule out someone that, say, maybe they live with a parent, or they live in an apartment. If they're a resident, a legal resident, and it's documented that way, isn't that, an alternative to being homesteaded?
I think it's for the planning board, though, it is a requirement now that they be able to verify a valid homestead exemption maintained throughout the term for that particular board.
Is that our rules or the state
That's
statutes?
our rules, 2.0202. That's actually in our thing. To be eligible, the selectee shall be a full-time, permanent, unincorporated resident of the area as verified by a valid homestead exemption in his or her name maintained throughout the term of office. It says the Flagler County Commission may waive the elector full-time, permanent, unincorporated residency or homestead. We can waive it just as long as we know when we're electing them onto the board. It needs to be a decision, that we waive the homestead requirement. So it's still there. There's a piece where we can waive it, but we have to know that before we put them in to the board, which I don't think didn't come on that vote. So we have a person on a board that's homesteaded in another county. And that's my first issue, is that above and beyond.
How do they do that? How can you be homesteaded and then live
I'd
here?
like, the state of Florida says that.
That particular circumstance, I agree, that's problematic.
Yeah, and I think we've brought it up to staff. It's been going on since July, and there's a back and forth to it. Well, they're living here, they're a voter here, but you're homesteaded in another county. So, and the state of Florida says homestead is his or her permanent residence. You make a good faith to say that's where you live, and I'd rather just take that person and say, fix your homestead and, welcome to come back when we have an opening on a board. But to me, it's a conflicting statement to have that here. And I think going forward on that board, whatever we end up doing with that, if we have a member that wants to join the board, like you said, you're not homesteaded, but you live here, just let us know before we, vote to put you on the board, which we had something. So it's several issues, but I totally agree with being a voter, first and foremost, on a board, and then having a permanent residency, and then ensuring that our staff verifies the permanent residency.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify on that. You said unincorporated part of the county, so we're saying somebody who lives in Palm Coast is not allowed either?
No, you guys make the exception, so the board does.
Is that an exception, though?
That was an
That would be
exception.
an
You made the exception. In fact, you made a comment, we have too many Palm Coastians, right, on the board. We had 3 right now, we were supposed to have 1 at large. But a lot of unincorporated don't apply to be on that board. So you do get to make that as an exception of the board, but at that time, when you swore in this member, you did not know that they were homesteaded elsewhere as well, which as of today, they
Out of the
continue to
county,
be
out
of county,
I just wanted to
Volusia.
make sure and make,
Right. Right, and they continue to be. So that's this whole separate incident, but if we don't address that on that particular board, which I don't think we've had the opportunity to talk about, what we want to do with that particular member, and then 2, going forward, we want to make sure that we stand up the voter registration, and that they're a resident, whether or not they're homesteaded, we can make an exception for the homesteading going forward.
Well, I think that's the only board that requires homesteading.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
the only one.
Okay.
Right. So it's 2 parts. So this one was, there are some members that are not registered voters. So I don't know what the ask was by staff for us to handle, how to handle that.
I think it was really just being provided for guidance because we have so many different boards and the criteria is different that we're trying to get
Yeah.
some sort of standard
Consistency.
consistency across the board and a baseline. So really, we were just looking for guidance from the board as far as moving forward, what direction do we want? In that one particular case that I know that the person has a homesteaded property outside, they claim to rent property in Flagler, and we deliver packets to them at that rental property. So I don't. They're agenda packets for the meeting. So
Yeah.
although they're not homesteaded here, they do rent property here.
But we are procedurally defective there in having
Yeah.
someone who.
I mean, I just don't understand the legality of how can you be homesteaded in a different county and live here?
I think
Because
it was a
you're supposed
result
to
of a
establish your
divorce.
homestead, you have
Yeah.
to live there.
I think
So-
it was a result of a divorce, and the property stayed with the husband.
But the state of Florida says where you're homesteaded, you make in good faith to be your primary. So I have to say that the board members decided to continue to homestead in Volusia, and that legally is your primary to the state. And I don't, I don't want that to come back on this board one day as saying you're defective there and have a challenge on something that was decided, on that board in a 3-2 or however one day. I think it's better to, give them a certain time frame to clean that up with the homestead, or come back to the board when you've cleaned it up and open the seat back.
I would think with the issues that have come to light, we give any of the applicants that are sitting some time to rectify and fix if they're not a registered voter, would
I
not
agree
take
with
long
that,
to
yeah.
become
For the registered.
registered voter. And I think we have different renewal periods. I think at the point of renewal, they fill out an affidavit that their information is correct as it is, or they change it and we keep record of the changed information. Because sometimes people that go on in a position for a couple of renewals, maybe their location has changed and we haven't caught it. So on those renewals or an annual basis, we just get an affidavit of those important issues, that they're still a registered voter and that their address is still
Yeah,
in the
I
county.
agree with that. I just think that within this one particular, in the voting, I completely agree with, we give them next renewal, a chance to get, registered to vote during next renewal. But I think having someone currently sit and make decisions that affect our local land and not knowing why they're still homesteaded, I think it's a problem to have a home on the planning board unless you want to bring the person back in front of us and make the proper vote to determine whether or not we waive that homestead.
But the issue is not rentals, right? You can have a person who rents on
No,
the-
yeah, and we just have to waive the
Okay.
homestead piece of it. So we
Because
didn't,
we
the
have
board.
trouble with specific
Right.
knowledge-based people that
Yeah.
are, have expertise in different aspects of, we can't make it too,
Maybe, I think the consensus maybe could be that if you are currently not registered we want you to be a registered voter
I
on all
think
boards
that's, I
going
think we've
forward.
all agreed there.
And if you are currently not registered, if you come through the renewal process and want to go back on the board, we'd like you, you
Right.
must be registered when you
Right.
come back. And you must always be a full-time resident of Flagler County. If you are not homesteaded, the board would waive that. We
Right.
need to know that knowledge to waive it. But with the current person, how do we want to deal with the
And the
current?
residents will be on the voter.
Right,
and their
yeah.
voter
Well,
ID.
and how do we want to deal with a person who is knowingly homesteaded somewhere else on a planning board, when the planning board requires that specific step?
I would allow staff to notify everybody. Maybe we start with the affidavit process with everybody that's on the board and make sure that all their information is current and correct, and anybody who's not, we give them a time period.
So how long do we give someone who's voting monthly to become unhomesteaded, or, in another county?
Couldn't you make a motion to remove them from the board?
That's what I would like to do.
If that's what you want to do, you
Yeah.
have the right to do that, don't?
I think I'm concerned that we're defective procedurally on that board in making decisions.
Well, I would defer to Mr. Hadid if we're in a liability issue on the planning board with that circumstance, and give them time to correct it and not be a part of the board until it's corrected.
I haven't seen that case come up where somebody has alleged a quasi-judicial violation, because on its face, the person is appointed, because you, as a board, appointed them. So I wouldn't say that it is necessarily any disqualification to a decision made by the board if such a person participated. But suppose they were the swing vote. I mean, I'm just saying hypothetically. So what you could do is simply say, for that person, for those that are not, and for that board where it's called out to be homesteaded, is to notify, or either have them all validate, one mailing to each one, please validate that you are currently homesteaded. And if not,
I think the issue may correct itself if we go through the affidavit process, and if it's not worth the effort to correct the homestead issue, then that person may withdraw. But I think we make everybody go through that process.
30 days for the homestead?
I'm sorry, Ms. Pennington, I couldn't hear
I'm
your
sorry.
last comment.
So what
That's
is
all
a
right.
proper time frame to give someone between now?
Well, that's in your judgment. There's not going to be any, I mean, your exercise, this is a governance issue that is within your discretion. You know, you're figuring out what are the qualifications that you want to insist upon for those people that serve you in an advisory capacity. When you look at the planning board, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be going on about this, but the planning board vets land use items for you. So you want the best input that you can get from the planning board, which means, going back another premise, you want the best possible people serving in those capacities so that it aids not just you in your decision-making, but the community as a whole. So where does that fall for you? Do you want to have everyone homesteaded that is acting as part of the planning board? And if your answer is yes, you tell us, boom, we'll make sure it happens. If you tell us, well, they can ask for exceptions. You know, they have to be pre-approved, if you will. You have to know that they're not homesteaded, and for some reason, because of their, I don't know, their qualifications, their experience, their historical involvement in civic matters within Flagler, you're willing to say, yes, I am willing to have that person. I think that person can provide us the contribution that we need. So you can do that. If you want to allow by exception, any rule that you make, you can create a exception requirement where any exception has got to be approved by the board. That's one way to do it.
For that specific board, the Flagler County Commission may waive that homesteading through a supermajority vote, is what it says. And so I suggest that maybe the consensus is that we bring this person back in for that waive and see if we're willing to waive by supermajority the homestead.
You're still not
gives them an
correcting the
opportunity.
homestead versus permanent residency.
Right. Well, she says she's a permanent resident, but the homestead in which you waived the unincorporated piece by supermajority that day, but what you did not waive was the homesteading, and then we give them an opportunity to clean it up in between now and that vote. You know, to clean up the homestead
I mean, what
in
we're
another
saying is you
county.
can't have the,
Can't be homesteaded.
in another county and have a primary
It
residence
negates
and a
you being
registered
a
voter
full-time
here.
resident of Flagler County. If you tell the state of Florida, I'm a resident of Volusia County, and by means of homesteading, which is in good faith, I'm telling you that is my primary residence, then you are effectively telling Flagler County the same thing in this rental property. The law airs where you're homesteaded, so she's therefore not a resident based on where you homestead.
I'm good
So it's
with
hard.
everybody.
It's hard to, you know.
I'm good with everybody verifying their information, and if they're not in compliance, they get 30 days.
Well, I think we verified this with this person in July when we had the emails, and they said, well, I'm written here, but I am still homesteaded there. And I checked today, they're still homesteaded there. I don't think, maybe the feedback has not been given, that you don't need to be no longer homesteaded, but how do you feel about this until it's resolved? So.
What do you think we should send a letter and say you've got 60 days to fix this, or you're off?
Well, I don't want to single, I think everybody, will look at their recent renewal, those that have submitted their information for renewal. Everybody, I think, should just verify their information and attest that it's accurate. If there's a conflict like a homestead and out of county, that needs to be rectified.
Just the planning board.
That's just the only board that
Okay.
requires it.
So then everybody on the
else is-
planning board.
Yeah. So we would like to set out where you're homesteaded, certify where you're homesteaded within the next 30 days.
Or rental, they don't, right?
Well, but we need to know that if they're homesteaded in New York, Volusia, where are you homesteaded? If so, where? Because that is the board. And if not, if they're not homesteaded in Flagler County, it needs to be waived by supermajority by us. Which I looked at some of the others, I don't think anybody ever brought up homesteading. It might have just been something the staff forgot, but for this board, but we need to vote to waive the homesteading.
And just to clarify, the homestead requirement is something that the board imposes. It's not a requirement by law. So when you look at other
we just waive it.
organizations,
But I don't have a problem if you live here and you're not homesteaded. I have a problem if you're homesteaded somewhere else. That's my thing. So, and there is a cure in here through a supermajority vote. So let's just rectify. Let's just fix the planning board issue, one way or the other, so that we all, because it's a known thing out there. And then I know you've been dealing with it. I've been dealing with it for a while.
There's two paths to cure the situation. One is that this individual fixes it. And so she's not homesteaded in Volusia. The other thing is to have her come in front of us and take a vote on whether or not to waive it.
Right. That's the way to cure it.
Those are the only two options we have.
Yeah. So,
Which really is only asking for implementation of the rule that you have in effect.
that's right.
Right.
Other than the prescription of the number of days.
Yeah. Yeah, we just want to.
Mr. Chairman, just a caution here. I agree with those two possibilities. I don't agree with a letter to everybody who's on a board, since it's only the planning board that's here. We have enough problems getting people to volunteer. So beyond some of these boards, I'm just afraid if we do too much administrative overhead, people say, well,
Yeah.
to hell with it
It's-
then,
yeah. And for the record, everyone else is Flagler County on the board. So this just happens to be this one
The
matter
one,
we
so
got to clean up.
I like the idea of being very specific about the way we handle this
We
particular
just have to
issue.
clean up this one thing.
Yeah.
That's all.
Right.
So I
Direction.
think it is to, if you are not, we all are in consensus, you must be a registered voter and a full-time resident on any board. And those who are not registered voters at this time, if you come in for renewal on that board, we'd ask that you then become a registered voter for that. And as for the current situation, we're going to give them 30 days to rectify or come in front of the board for a waiver through supermajority vote of the homestead.
Come before.
Sound right?
So what, 30 days? Is that enough time?
Is that enough?
I have no idea.
I have no idea.
I have no idea. Since from the
Well, it's one or
date
the
of
other. You're either going to get it
notification.
cleaned up or come in here and we all just hear the story and
It's going to be by
decide.
letter, send it as a certified letter.
We
and
can
it'll
waive
be a
it,
date.
but
Well, Ms. Petito, I think we need to send a certified letter to this individual outlining our concern and to get back to you within 30 days with a plan to rectify it. And if it cannot be rectified, then we'll have to take a vote to waive it or not.
They just have to become compliant with
Yep,
our.
That's all. We just
There
got to make her
are things.
compliant. That's all. We can do that. Okay? All right.
got it, thank you.
Item 8C, correct minutes of the Board of the County Commissioners of 12/3/2018 to conform to motion and action taken at said meeting. Request the clerk correct the error in the board's December 3, 2018 regular meeting minutes to accurately reflect the motion made and action taken by the board at said meeting.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
This is an item that we brought forward because in the course of the litigation that we have with Captain's Barbecue, this issue was pointed out that the minutes that were published for that meeting in December, in December 3, 2018, that it is stated both ways, that it's rescinded and reconsidered. And legally, there's a very significant difference. The actual, we gave you the link to the video if you had a chance to hear it or not. that it was a reconsideration. It was validated by then Chair Commissioner O'Brien to clarify that the motion being considered, the motion that was on the floor was a motion to reconsider, which does not have the effect of terminating that lease. And as you may know from history, at least those of you serving from that time forward, that lease continued under reconsideration, review, alternatives, even adjusting the site of the proposed replacement restaurant. That process took at least 7 months. In any event, we brought this to your attention. Obviously, this has also been provided to the clerk. I believe the clerk has examined that record and has distributed to you a revised set of minutes, a corrected set of minutes as to the actions that specifically took place. Now, you would not be considering, I don't know if you've read it, I know you've all received it, I received it and looked at it. This would not be the time that we would vote that you're going to adopt. We're going to do it just as we normally do. That is, you've gotten a set of minutes. It'll be put on the consent agenda for the next meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. And at that time, you can vote to approve it with all the consent agenda items or pull it and have some discussion about it. So anyway, this is the procedural step that we are taking to have the clerk relook at the video and so forth and make any corrections, and then for you to later take that corrected version and dispose of it at the next meeting.
Well, I think that's what we have to do. I've read all that stuff, and it clearly, we have to clear that up, and it was very clear what Ms. Sullivan said, and we just have to make sure that's what the minutes reflect.
Right.
Pretty simple.
Yeah, I wasn't there. I watched the video and he said reconsider.
Consider, yeah. Yeah. So, let's proceed along that path.
Well, you need to vote on the motion. Even though the clerk has already done what the memo said, you still need, I think, for the record to say you're requesting the clerk to, you need to approve the recommendation.
So I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve item 8C, correct minutes of the Board of County Commissioners, 12/3/2018, to conform motion and action taken at said meeting.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to correct the minutes of the Board of County Commissioners 12/3/2018 meeting. Anybody in the public wish to comment on this?
Thank you, Jane Gentile Youth. I was at all the Bing's meetings, including the original one in November, when it was determined by the general services that the building was falling apart. That's how this all started. What's really disgusting about this whole thing is I don't think the minutes were unintentionally changed. I think they were intentionally changed. We have spent close to $160,000 of county tax money for a vote that the county commission should have been told November 2018, hey guys, you cannot take a piece of public property and allow a private industry to use it for private purposes, specifically that we bought the land with preservation funds. That building, the lawsuit was filed in June 2019, and thank you, Mr. Sullivan. The county attorney should have told all of the commissioners sitting at that meeting, don't do that. You're going to get us in trouble. You can't give county land. And the reason they wanted the new building to seat 150 people is because the state of Florida requires a seating capacity of 150 people to give a hard liquor license. Right now, they have wine and beer. They don't make enough money on that. Island Estates, one of the owners, he's there to docks and ships and boats, $600 a month rent. They pay us not a dime on their liquor profit, and we are responsible for the liquor license. Do you realize that? If somebody gets killed, we get sued, not them. The lease says that the insurance, that everything in the insurance is going to be taken over by them. Mr. O'Brien, you're an insurance agent. The owner of a property can never be excused from being responsible for injuries that occur on that property, no matter who they lease it to. And again, I'm an expert realtor. They were sued. The county paid. Al Hadid told me we're trying to get the monies back from Bing's Landing. That'll never happen. One of the owners is also operating a charter boat facility at Bing's Landing on the docks, the floating docks that we maintain. And Heidi Petito tells me there's nothing she can do about it. The lawsuit Bing's Landing filed says they're suing the county because they have to close their business. Their business 5 years later is still operating. They're making millions, and the case should be thrown out of court, but instead you've wasted $160,000 of our tax money, and I have to borrow from the bank to pay my property tax bill for this bull crap.
Next speaker. Seeing no one approach, I'll bring it back to the commission. The motion is to correct the minutes of the Board of County Commissioners 12/3/2018. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. On to 9A. The first item is a legislative item. It's application number 3348, future land use map amendment from mixed use, low intensity, low medium density to commercial high intensity at 5276 and 5288 North Ocean Shore Boulevard. Adam.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, Adam Engel, Growth Management Director. Maybe as a prelude to these items, these four items, 9A, 9B being related, future land use and rezoning for a single property, 9C, 9D being related then, future land use and rezoning for a specific property. Vincent Sullivan's present on behalf of the owner as the applicant for the properties. You saw as part of my memo that he's requested a continuance through to January. What we've had that's maybe unique with this, where others we've just put a memo in your packet and said, you know, look, they've asked for this, we're all in favor of it. We've done notice for tonight's meeting for each of the four items, and it has had then its Planning and Development Board review on these. And so of those four, you saw that. 9A, recommendation for denial. 9B, recommendation for denial. 9C, recommendation for approval, but looking for clarity from the board on a specific comprehensive plan policy. And 9D, recommendation for denial. So with that kind of precursor there, I can either give a full presentation on each of the four, and then you do still have those options available to you. You can approve, deny, or continue. Continuance would be to a time and date certain, but we would still have to do public notice again because of recent changes in statute. These are both adopted by ordinance, so to keep the record clear, we would still do notice irregardless of you know, if you say to January, we'll start to do notice anyway. We can't forego that. So I just wanted to gauge the board's tempo. I'll be happy to go through each of these.
The applicant wants to delay?
Yes, sir. Yeah, and certainly if you do take any action, you can see the green shirts behind us. I would want to at least submit first for the record that we do have a complete packet. You have the excerpt of the minutes from the planning board for each of these four items reflecting the board action. You have the complete petition document that's attached to item 9A, the first of the four, along with any other handouts that we had. The intent there is that those will be attached to the planning board's minutes, so they'll be made part of the record, so they will succeed then for any successive actions on this. We'll present those back to you. But you have that complete record now. I don't want to forestall or prevent anybody from making comments tonight. We are still here for public hearings, and if anyone wants to make comments, certainly I'd want to have it open for that. But with that, I'll look to maybe Mr. Sullivan, maybe to the board, and then we can certainly go into each of these in detail if you would like to.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. O'Brien.
Could I ask a question before we do
Yes.
that? And it's really for the attorney, for Mr. Audit. Do we, if we were to have a full hearing on these items tonight, on the quasi judicial ones, do we run afoul, or do we have any concerns about due process?
You mean if you heard them? If you heard them tonight?
Given the fact that there's a request to postpone them?
No. Well, the request to postpone would be within your discretion. If you decided to hear them, then you are lawfully entitled to hear them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan.
I'm just a little confused on where we are on this now, based on what we received from you and looking at it. And what I'm concerned about, the last item we just voted on is an example of it. I would like from our attorney, are we in danger of another lawsuit if we, say, pushed on tonight and didn't take a little more time to look at this? That's my concern. If there's any way we can avoid, if we can get better clarification, get the right decision firmer by waiting, I'm in favor of that, but I'm at your mercy. I am concerned with things that can happen.
Well, I think if the applicant wishes to push it off, then the right thing to do, I think, of the board is to push it off till they're ready to make their case. Right? I mean, that's what I think I hear is there's something, they think they have something else to work on.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm certainly ready to make a presentation. I think Mr. Sullivan could also make a presentation to you. I think what he's asked for is more time to be able to work out the details with the owner, perhaps with the community. He said till January. I'm certainly able and ready to make a presentation on each of the four. And then at the end of each one of those presentations, if the decision's still to table, or to continue, you can still do so. Those are still options available to you. But I just wanted to make sure up front, I didn't want to waste anyone's time, that if ultimately we wanted to hold off on that, Mr. Sullivan, again, may have better comments on the reasons for his requests on this. We're ready.
And let me add, maybe I wasn't fully explanatory. This comes under a provision of our land development code whereby we are hearing, we're having a review of what the planning board decided. So notice of that was already published. So if you were going to decide to postpone a decision, you need to do it in accordance with the presentation of the applicant as to why that postponement. You need to have that in the record. Let's say they make that presentation and that you are predisposed to granting it. Then one of you is going to make a motion, but it's been advertised for public hearing. So I'm looking out here, it's I don't think that many of you are here for whatever the next one is, 9D, whatever it is, that you're going to need to allow the public to comment who have come here in order to comment on this proposal. Even if the proposal is going to be postponed, maybe in the postponement it'll even be reshaped somewhat, you're still going to need to allow the public to comment that have come here who wish to comment on these items.
We can do that. Not a problem. So let's take 9A.
All right. Today's future land use amendment request for mixed-use, low-intensity, low to medium-density commercial, high-intensity. Subject property here at the southwest corner of 18th Road, North Ocean Shores, the two parcels together. And then here's the land use, as we mentioned, mixed-use, low, the residential commercial, residential limited commercial on the zoning that's there. Then you see the flood zone portion is within the shaded X zone. Portion is outside of that, and then our soils that we present also to show the mainly no presence of wetlands, and that's consistent with the wetlands map that follows. And so what we had then was staff's level review, and this is our short analysis we provided before. It gives you a comparison of the impacts, and so it's intended to be the worst case scenario. And one of the things we had mentioned in this is we don't have any specificity on the intended use. And so the first limiting factor and the key limiting factor, I think, here more than anything else, is that you'll see on the top of each of these slides, that mixed-use low has a 50% of the development area, assuming then that it develops with its majority developing as commercial. And so that following that comp plan policy that talks about this, 25,043 square feet would be the area that could be used on these parcels in total for commercial development. And so then under
Commercial or residential?
Correction? I'm sorry, sir?
Commercial or residential on the mixed-use low?
Mixed-use low would actually have I think it's a 20% open space, and so it would leave a difference of 30% for residential typically. Now, the board had made a decision before, and it was
What
related
I'm saying is they can put under mixed-use low,
Yes.
you could put 8 homes there.
They could, but it's got two scenarios. It's got a scenario where you have majority residential or majority commercial. And so when you read that policy, this is that majority commercial number. The best number they could get out of it would be up to 50% of that development area utilized for commercial. And then it actually drops in the commercial high-intensity scenario to that 0.4 floor area ratio, maximum of 20,034 square feet. So what do you get for that trade-off? You get the ability to do some more uses that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So bottom line on this, and I think the applicants even admitted it, is that under the residential limited commercial, your commercial uses come through the granting of a special exception. They are limited in their nature. Commercial high intensity has aligned with it the C2 zoning, which allows a different set of uses that are typically more intense. You do have prohibited uses that are listed within both within the scenic A1A. And so those are the same, similar. They're not directly matching like for like. You'll see then, I think previously, and I think I may have put it in this time, I had the RC and the C2 for reference for you. Mr. Clark went further. He put comparisons in there in a chart so you can kind of link them together. I don't have any disagreement with what he's put together, but bottom line, you have a different set of uses that are in play here with the future land use along with the mix of the C2, both of those going together. So what I did here was this analysis. Again, this is staff's level analysis that shows a difference between the two. And so from a standpoint of square footage, you're having seemingly a decrease just because of that limiting factor that we have in the intensity of the use. And then you're taking away the residential component here, at least in the example that's part of this application request. So you would have no population impacts. And so much of this then follows that same path. The commercial high intensity, and I believe I used a convenience store, gas station type scenario. And what I'd also mentioned in here is just kind of how that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense because you're not going to have a 20,000 square foot convenience store unless we can get Buc-ee's. And that won't be on A1A anyway. But that's the scenario that we're going through. The majority of those show up as about 6,000 square feet that we have that are the new ones. We won't have that in A1A, but that's a scenario I have to use because I have to use the worst case. I have to use the worst of the generator for our impacts. And so here, in the situation with transportation, this requested land use would result in 16,865 additional trips. Your water, 1,372 gallons additionally. Per day. 862 gallons on the sanitary sewer demand. Solid waste would be 45.6 pounds additional demand Parks and Recreation, you'd actually have a decrease because we're again not having a residential component with this request. And then the same then would follow with the students. You'd have less of a student impact because you're taking away the residential. So the summary that we had that we provided to the planning board, just over 1 acre, that amendment there, and then I've copied the language that you had that talks about that. So hopefully that puts it in a little bit better perspective. You got your 20% right from the onset. I think that's open space, 25%. And so then you have your mix, 15 minimum, 70% maximum on your residential, your retail and office, 15% maximum of 50. So if you're doing a commercial intense commercial over the residential, your maximum you can have on the floor area is 50% from the onset. You can't go anything more than that. No intended uses identified. I think that was part of the hand-wringing that was part of the planning board's deliberations. Parcel is proximate to other commercial uses at the intersection. Then this, of course, the Flume Amendment is linked to the zoning request, the rezoning 3349, which is the next item here. Planning and Development Board did unanimously recommend denial, and then the applicant did request that continuance to the January board meeting. Of the three options available for you, approval, denial, or continuance. Approval would be that you find that the request meets the requirements of the comprehensive plan, is consistent with that, and then denial would be that a finding is made that it is not consistent. With that, I'll close, wait any questions or comments, and then Mr. Sullivan's present on behalf of the applicant for his presentation. Thank you.
Mr. Sullivan.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Vincent Sullivan with Shemental Law on behalf of the applicant Star Car Wash LLC. As Mr. Mingle did note at the outset, we are asking for a continuance to the January evening board meeting. My notes tell me, I believe that's January 15th, 2024, be held in this chambers. And to go ahead and talk about the reason we're asking for the continuance is that primarily there was one comprehensive plan policy that was brought up at planning board that none of us saw coming. And frankly, shame on us for not doing our homework and finding it. And in the time since planning board and the time to today's hearing for this application and the subsequent future land use application, we and the applicant haven't had enough time to research what that comprehensive policy was intended to do and what its intended application was. So we would like to have a better understanding of what that policy is designed for in anticipation of the questions that are going to be coming from the folks in the audience and from you commissioners as well this evening. But on that note and with that backdrop in mind, Mr. Mingle, as usual, has done a fantastic job highlighting what this project is. Out front, it is not going to be a car wash. That was clearly established at the planning board. Neither this site nor the other site that we're going to hear about here in a few minutes are physically large enough to house a car wash on it, especially when you take into effect that there's not sanitary sewer available at the site at the moment. So there is no currently identified intended use of the project. The COM2 designation is intended to allow for the flexibility of a different type of use down the road. One thing that I believe that was left out of the planning board and that may have aided in their decision making is the fact of the A1A scenic overlay byway restrictions in that C2 designation. I've got issues with why that designation's in there and how that buttresses the comprehensive plan policy that we're butting up against. But ultimately, you'll see this project is a total net decrease in potential square footage as the property sits today from its RC counterpart, as we'll hear about shortly. It's a decrease impact on our parks, and it's a net decrease. We believe it's ultimately going to be a net decrease on our water demand and on the solid waste component as well. There is obviously and naturally going to be an increase in traffic. Anytime you change something from a residential to a commercial use, it's going to come with a increase in traffic. Mr. Mingle hit the nail on the head. Yes, it could be a 20,000 square foot convenience store, but realistically, that's not going out on A1A. That's not what that community needs, and no market analysis would support anything of that nature going out there. Moreover, it wouldn't support a 6,000 square foot gas station going out there like the racetrack we've got out on State Road 100 at the corner of Seminole Woods. So the end use isn't identified, but physical proximity and the size of the project has to be taken into consideration with its compatible surrounding uses. We've got several uses up and down A1A, such as Hammock Hardware, we've got Hammock Wine and Cheese, we've got JT's, we've got the Citgo, all right there. All of these are consistent uses, and as outlined in our initial application letter for this application, we believe we have hit the mark on many different comprehensive plan policies, and if this board's inclined to make a decision on this application tonight, we would request approval.
Thank you. Commissioners? Comments? Mr. Sullivan, anything?
I guess I have some, I don't know what I'm going to ask is my problem. The planning board said no.
All right.
So that's where we are right now from any kind of official action.
Andy, anything?
There was a lot of discussion at the meeting about I think the policy that Mr. Sullivan is talking about, which has a component on preserving coastal vegetation. I'm inclined, I mean, if the applicant needs more time, I'm not opposed to meeting the applicant's request. It's, I just, you know, I think if they've put the time and are asking for a request, I don't have a problem with that. And if it is concerning the one specific comp plan element, which would give everybody else an equal time to analyze and put forth, you know, the case as well on that one element. The planning board basically was didn't know where to proceed on that element. So I think all of us here need to, because it's front and center. We can't wait for the comp plan. We're in the midst of the comp plan rewrite, but we can't wait. So I don't oppose more time so everybody can analyze what that element was intended to do and what it means.
Ms. Pennington, anything? No? Mr. O'Brien?
No, I agree with Commissioner Dance's comments, and I think that'd be a prudent path, and we definitely need some debate and discussion about that, so.
Yeah, my only comment is not identifying what they're going to do. And I think that if we were to approve a change to C2, that puts the five of us at risk about what's going to happen over on A1A. And that's troublesome to me, that we have now just said, yeah, go ahead. If we approved it, we'd say, now go ahead, you know, do whatever you want to do. And so we're at risk by not knowing why you want to change it to C2. And that said, your answers to the required questions that the technical review board asked, your answers were like you had in mind what you were going to do because you talked about the impact it was going to have. And how can you make statements about the impact of what you're going to do without knowing what you're going to do? And I found that troublesome, and that was throughout your responses to questions. They were disingenuous at best. So they need a little work. Either that or tell us what you're going to do. I think for us to consider this, we need to know what you're going to do. It's too risky just to say carte blanche. We're going to change it to C2, and you can do whatever you want. No, we're not going to do that. So, Mr. Dance.
Well, I think the other part, right, is it's one thing for you to say something about what we will and won't do, but properties are entitled and sold all the time, and we lose contact with statements or guarantees, which really are not, unless they're written into a development order, aren't guarantees. And where, if it was approved the way it is, the property becomes entitled and can be sold with that entitlement. And back to what Commissioner Hansen said, without a site plan, we have to assume the worst possible scenario. So the 6,000 plus trips at the worst case scenario as an impact to the roadway is what we have to assume, which again puts us not in the best position. And again, my only thing for giving you time is maybe as we go through some of these things, there'll be some other components. I don't think some of that changes unless you change your plan moving forward, but anybody else?
No?
I'm comfortable voting on it as it was submitted. Not a continuance, but, I mean, take it at face value. It's an unknown entity at the highest density.
And I
That's up to
don't
you.
disagree that
It wants a motion, sorry.
Okay.
So I would entertain a motion to do one of those three things: approve, deny, or continue. I can't tell my board members what to do, but does anybody want to make a motion on this issue?
I'd like to make a motion to deny application 3348 for future land use map amendment.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to deny application number 3348, future land use map amendment. Anybody in the public wish to comment on this?
Good evening, members of the commission. Dennis Bear on behalf of the Hammock Civic Association. A couple of comments. You know, this is kind of a rare situation where your planning board did recommend denial in the fashion that it did. And as far as the issue of the future land use language concerning native vegetation, we've done our homework since the planning board. We got a botanist involved, we looked up the definitions, and it's pretty clear what is meant by the language in the future land use. And these sites qualify because of the age of the vegetation. Its native vegetation was there. That species existed at the time that the first settlers came, and somebody else is going to address that in more detail. So we think that it's just a delay. Oh, and by the way, the January 15th meeting, that's Martin Luther King Day, so I think that's a holiday. I don't know that y'all will be here, so if you are going to postpone it, I don't think that's an appropriate date. A couple of comments. As was mentioned, there's no use listed. In the language, it was very clear from my colleague, Mr. Sullivan, at the planning board, at this time. Because of septic tanks, you can't have a car wash at this time. Central water comes in, central sewer comes in, it's a whole different ballgame. And as was pointed out, once the entitlements are there, the entitlements are there. And specifically, I'd like to draw your attention to the language in your existing codes, and this deals with the rezoning as well as the future land use map amendment, so I promise I won't get up and regurgitate this next time I get up. But your RC zoning, this district, and this is the language from 3.03.13, this district is primarily intended for application to parcels within the A1A scenic corridor. And there's quite a few commercial uses that are allowed as special exception, as we've seen before in other projects. The C2 zoning and that more intensive classification under 3.03.17 is for higher intensity commercial uses, and it specifically states in your code it is intended that such commercial areas will be located around the interchange of I-95 and Palm Coast Parkway, I-95 and State Road 100, I-95 and US 1. Not in the hammock, not in the scenic A1A corridor. So that's why we think that the RC zoning is appropriate. And if they are successful, first, they don't have to come in for a special exception, and two, it doesn't have to go to the planning board. It's a TRC staff, boom. No public input as to the intensity of the impacts. As was pointed out by Mr. Mengel, is if you get the 20,000 square feet of commercial, and Adam will correct me if I'm wrong, but that requires 400 parking places. Not enough room on this parcel to qualify for that. And as was pointed out, an additional 16,865 trips is going to be generated. So yeah, we may have less impact on the parks, but nobody's going to be able to get to the parks because there's going to be so many cars on A1A. So our concern is, well, we think the planning board made the right decision. We think we're protected by native vegetation, and this is just too intensive a use. And you know, your application forms for rezoning says the applicant must submit 33 sets of site plans so everybody knows what's going on the property. That's been there since the beginning of time that I've been familiar with this planning process here in Flagler County. So I appreciate your consideration, and I would respectfully request that you uphold the decision of your planning board. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis.
Mr.
Next
Chair,
speaker.
Could I ask,
Yeah.
this might be relevant for,
Yes.
for Mr. Bayer. This is not a deciding factor for me, but I thought I read in the backup about, was this land reclaimed? Was it developed in the past? Something about?
One parcel, we weren't able to find any signs of a driveway. Again, we didn't trespass on the property, but we had a botanist go up to the border of the property, look through it. And again, somebody else is going to address that. One of my members here kind of split up the issues, but they'll go into what they actually observed at the site. And it wasn't any like old pavement or anything of that we noticed as part of that site visit.
Okay.
Mr. O'Brien, I did that research, and there was an old ice cream shop.
Ice cream shop.
There was.
Got it.
But it hadn't been there for years, and the natural vegetation has all come back. You know, looks like it's virgin property almost again. So.
Thank you.
But again, I haven't been on it. We did it all with. Yep.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you. Next speaker. Mr. Clark.
Hi, Dennis Clark, 5784 North Ocean Shore Boulevard. I don't want to belabor this, but I had about 50 arguments, so I thought I'd give you 5.
Microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. I had about 50 arguments, so I thought I'd give you 5. If somebody could get the overhead to work, there's a presentation that goes along with this, possibly, if it works. I also had handouts, but I forgot to bring them along, so excuse me for that. First of all, it does not make sense that someone could request a change in land use without specifying what the land would be used for. Thus, the need for a traffic study in the FLUM application, which is stated in the application that that's required, it is also very unconventional to ask for a zoning change without a site plan as specified in the rezoning application. This is speculative rezoning and sets a bad precedent. A change like this, I'm talking about rezoning because it's tied directly to the future land use change. Change like this is a big deal in the hammock. The last land use, I don't know if you can see it, but the last land use change to commercial high intensity and rezoning to C2 was probably 20 years ago for Publix and SunTrust Bank. These were seen as very desirable businesses for the area. The size was scaled appropriately, and the landowner made it disappear behind the trees with help from Scenic A1A. One of the arguments used to justify this change is that businesses should be clustered, as mentioned in the 2003 charrette, which planned for future growth in the hammock and Flagler Beach. What is not mentioned in the argument is that the implementation of clustering was to be in village centers, having multiple businesses with shared parking and entrances off of A1A to keep the traffic off the scenic byway. The Public SunTrust Center accomplishes this goal. Remember that A1A is a constrained facility and cannot be widened. In the handouts, you can see that RC zoning, you don't have the handouts, but you have it in your package. RC zoning was designed specifically for the scenic corridor. There are at least 35 business types that are specified in RC as low intensity and make sense for the scenic corridor. They include banks, pharmacies, restaurants, offices, and retail shops. Why then would someone need C2 high-intensity zoning? Do they want a car wash, a nightclub, or do they want to avoid the special exception review required with RC zoning? In case you missed it, there are 9 comprehensive plan objectives listed in the Scenic A1A Pride Review that support the argument to deny these applications. Remember, this is speculative land use and rezoning and should never be allowed. 15 seconds.
Thank you. Good use of your time. Next speaker, please.
Hi, I'm Peter Wentworth, 35 Nantucket Drive. These guys want C2 zoning, which includes used car lots, strip clubs, broken machinery repair, resale. And now I know the A1A overlay prohibits that, but their next stop then is to petition A1A. So the worst case you were considering could be a strip club in the hammock. And if we want to turn the hammock into a garbage dump, these guys will make some money, but it'll cost the rest of us residents a lot. As far as them pushing it back to January 15th, he fully admitted it's their fail, but the whole community shows up, we do our part, and now we're going to have to mobilize back on January to come back again just to accommodate them. I mean, I don't really feel that's legitimate. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name's William Jordan. I live on North Ocean Shore Boulevard in the Hammock, and I appreciate your time this evening in letting us speak. As Mr. Baird mentioned, we did have a botanist go out and look at the area. The question of native plants and vegetation came up during the planning board. I was at the meeting, and I was a little surprised that the planning board members didn't really seem to understand or comprehend. There seemed to be some fuzziness with it, and I had even known because of previous research that it's well defined what a native plant is. And I'm sure Mr. Dance is well familiar with it. But we went and looked, and there's the University of Florida Institute of Food and Agriculture gives the definition of native plants as a plant that has been in the state prior to European settlement. And then the Florida Statute 5B-40 is a plant species that is presumed to have been present in Florida before European contact. It's very well defined what a native plant is. One of the planning board members kind of made the point that, well, whatever you develop, whether it's RC or C2, the plants are going to get cut back, and we agree with that. There will be plants cut back. The difference is the applicant's going from low intensity, low medium density wants to go to commercial high intensity, which is in direct conflict to what the comp plan says is areas of native vegetation will be limited to the low intensity mixed use or low density residential. It's a direct conflict to it. So we were just couldn't understand why there's that whole disparity in our guidance. So the preponderance of native vegetation that is there needs to be at least taken care of so we don't end up with another beach walk where it just comes in and gets clear cut. Since I've got 1 minute left, I'll also just throw out there, it seems to me the developer has not stated what it is he wants to develop. One of the things I considered is that obviously he's decided there's a whole slew of things he doesn't want to do, all those things he could get a special exception for without going through all this other process. Those aren't on the table. It is something else, or he wouldn't be going through trying to get a C2 designation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm not going to come up here 4 times and repeat myself because we don't want to be here all night. But my statement is meant for all 4 of the applications, 9A through 9D. I've lived in the Hammock for 27 years with my husband. We raised our kids there. The Hammock is designated as a scenic corridor, and as such should need zoning changes from RC to high density. If you want to buy a property and run a business in the Hammock, by all means, come ahead. We're not anti-business, but do not move into our neighborhoods and try to change our laws and tell us what we should have to live with. If you want high density, then buy a property that's zoned high density. We don't want your above-ground boat storage facilities or car washes or anything like that. We are a neighborhood. Changing the zoning sets a terrible precedence. Please leave our residential commercial zoning alone. It's there for a reason.
Thank you. Next speaker. You know an approach? Whoops, Ed?
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman and Commission. My name's Ed White. My wife Kim and I live at 27 Ocean Street in the northern section of the Hammock. We moved here 5 years ago when we bought property and built our new home. We're both native Floridians, born and raised in Northeast Florida, Jacksonville area. One of the reasons we moved down here was to get away from urban sprawl and commercial overreach. We loved the Hammock. We fell in love with it. A couple of things we really were impressed with were, one, that the area was designated as a scenic corridor. and all the things that come along with that. We were also very impressed that the zoning in the area, the RC that was created specifically for the hammock, made it such that commercial development was limited. We think that maybe it wasn't this specific board, but maybe a predecessor to this board was very smart in choosing that type of a zoning classification for our area. It's left the hammock mostly very beautiful, with a wonderful ambiance that we all want to keep. I mean, native vegetation's important, no doubt about it, and the data that was presented about, you know, road usage and square footage of buildings and all these things, I'm sure are very important too. But I think we need to remember, what do the people that live in the hammock want and need? If we need or want something commercial, it's handled by the RC classification. If I want to buy a car, I can go across the Intracoastal Waterway. If I want to get my car fixed, I can go over there. If I want a car wash, even though they say they don't want a car wash, I can go over many places across the Intracoastal Waterway. We don't need more intense commercial in the hammock. And in fact, I assume somebody's going to present that we have petitions with many, many signatures, over 1,000, I think. That's the people who have already put their name on a line that says, we don't want to change the zoning in this area. How many people have come forward to say they want the zoning change? I don't see any petitions for that. Maybe they have them, I don't know. So I think we need to take a look at what the people want, not just data. And you represent the people, and we don't want the zoning of RC changed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ed. Next speaker. Welcome, Jan.
Hi, thank you. Nice to see you, Greg. My name is Jan Sullivan. I am not related to this Mr. Sullivan or this Mr. Sullivan. Thought I'd make that clear. To follow up on Ed's comment, I had an opportunity to meet the owner of this property, and I thought it was interesting because he said he was new here and had funds, was lucky to have been successful in a previous life, and had funds to do something nice for his new neighbors, something that we would really like. But I feel now, and looking back, that he was just very disingenuous. He's not telling us what it is that he wants to do that we are supposed to like. And obviously, the people he's wanting to become good neighbors with, all of the green shirts, as you called them, we're not all that excited about it. So I just feel like that whole conversation was kind of freaky in retrospect. The second thing I want to mention is during the park, the gentleman that was here that was representing the park
Master
project.
plan.
Thank you, POP. The first thing on his first or second slide that said that what people wanted was conservation of wildlife and trees. Parks are not the only place that wildlife and trees live. They also live on RC properties. They also live on residential properties. And I have a lot on Hernandez, and just across the street from our lot on Hernandez on the river, a lady went in and just clear-cutted, residential, just clear-cutted that beautiful property for her home. So please keep in mind what the people who gave their input for the parks wanted, which was conservation of wildlife and trees, because that also applies to all of these zoning decisions that you have before you. Thanks so much for the time that you give.
Thank you, Jan. Next speaker. George, you need to sit closer to the microphone.
George Mayo, Palm Coast. The question I'm here, I do not live in the hammock, but I don't think you need a heavy commercial out there. But the question I hear right now is, the planning board said no. I don't know how many times Adam has come up here with different things and said, planning board recommends yes, recommends yes, recommends yes. For me to sit here after all the meetings I've come to and hear the planning board says no, I know you have to make your own decisions with that in mind, but to hear the planning board say no, I hope that advises your decision. Thank you.
Thank you, George. Next speaker. Yes, sir.
My name is Tom Gallagher. I live in the hammock as well. You as representatives of the public, you should know what they intend to build in an area that's, on a scenic highway. It's always nice to build something that's nice, but everybody has to agree on what that is. And I don't think we do that right now. We're not agreeing. And growth is only good to a certain point. And then if you allow it, and this change is done, and it is too late, and what makes the hammock unique and what I fell in love with won't be.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. Whoops.
My name is Dennis McCardle. I live at 46 Moody Drive in the hammock, in the Marineland Acres subdivision. I moved here 5 years ago, and the main reason I moved here was because of the beauty of the nature and the green spaces which surround the hammock. That's why people come here to visit and spend tourist dollars so they can visit our beautiful place. And we're going to kill ourselves if we keep on tearing things down and making it just as commercial as Daytona Beach or any other place. Look at what happened to St. Augustine. It's going down the tubes. You can't even get into the damn place, excuse the expression. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is Jonathan Chulis. I live on 7 Bay Drive. I just wanted to make everybody else's comments and kick the horse a little bit more. I grew up in the hammock, born and raised there my entire life. I did 12 years in the Marine Corps, went all over the world, decided out of all the places to come back to live, the hammock was going to be the place to raise our 2 children and have one more on the way. So I don't want to tell them the legacy that I had to show them nothing. And part of that is this process and standing up for the things that we want as the people that live in the hammock. So the rezoning to the high intensity, I don't think has any place anywhere in the hammock, let alone the greater area that surrounds it as well. If we want those things, we have more opportunities to go to St. Augustine, Palm Coast, and go north or south to get that from any other place. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service, sir.
Next speaker.
I'm Andy Belinsky, and I live in Ocean Hammock. For the planning board, my wife last time said I was very harsh. I won't disappoint you. We were buyer number 3 in 1998 in Ocean Hammock, and we came back and forth from the Washington, D.C. area for many years. And 6 years ago, we decided this is full-time. We sold everything up there. I worked for President Reagan for a while, did some other things, but I also built 20 houses that are worth well over $1 million each. I always had a plan which had to be reviewed and approved. Mr. Sullivan says, well, we don't have a plan yet. We don't know what we're going to do. Your comments today indicate that you don't believe that. If they're good businessmen, they already have a plan, which means they're lying to you today. So you can accept that or not. If they don't have a plan, I've been an investor And I wouldn't invest in a bunch of property with no plan. It would be risk of throwing your money away. So your comments today are good. I'll give you back a minute and a half. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. Going once. Okay, see no one approach. I'll bring it back to the commission. The motion is to deny application 3348. All in favor, say aye. Whoops. Yeah, if you want to talk.
Clarify, please.
Go for it, Andy.
My earlier comments, I'm not afraid and don't shy away from a good debate or good conversation, which is my original intent. If the applicant wanted to come back with some additional information, I was all for having that additional debate. But the other comment from the public was that, look, we're already here. So we'll have to kind of respect it as well, the time that you've taken out of your time to hear this item. So with all that said, we've got a motion and we're going to debate it. A few items that I think are important is right, what is the intent of the coastal area? Within the coastal area, development of areas of native vegetation will be limited to low-intensity mixed use or low-density residential. Wasn't around when this was crafted or written into the comp plan, but in my experience, it was there because low-intensity mixed use development is typically site-sensitive development. It's not a large footprint buildings. It's that type of development where you can work within the existing vegetation, the trees and the canopy that's there. The intent is to preserve, I think Ms. Sullivan said right at the top of the parks, it was conservation and wildlife protection was the top component. I think you could add tree canopy into that mix, especially with what the hammock is. It's a unique coastal hammock community with specific vegetative aesthetics. That is probably the intent of this, as I read it, is to preserve the unique tree characteristics and aesthetics of the hammock. That's achieved with something that's low density, not necessarily high density. And we've seen high density can take up more of that. So I think that's the intent, and I think if we live by that, I think we get to preserve that aesthetic, that vegetation and the aesthetic. Special exceptions, I have problems, right? By going through straight zoning to C2, it was talked about we lose some of the special exception protections. And I think one of the unique characters as well is being able to, and there's a wide assortment of commercial development that's available under RC, but what we're able to do is if it falls within the special exception category is we get to look at it a little bit more intently with how is it going to affect the other residences, because there's, even in this parcel, there's residents just back behind it on the adjacent roadway system. We heard at Planning Board, I believe it was, about even some of the unintended consequences of Bronx House and the additional noise and parking that came about from Bronx House. That was a special exception in the RC district. And I think there's still work to be done to make sure we protect the residents under that. And then the fact that we don't have the traffic study or a site plan that refers to specific traffic studies, if we're going to do that, we have to kind of apply. The applicant is basing this, no traffic study was included because trips are going to be under the threshold 500 trips. If you do that, you have to start limiting the land use with policy-specific limitations. And then once that goes into effect, it's just not the way that you want to go ahead doing land use amendments. So now that we have something to debate, thought I'd throw out some of those those ideas that I have as far as this goes. So again, wouldn't have been adverse to transitioning it or extending it, but I respect the fact that you showed up and are here tonight. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome. Anything else? Counselor?
Mr. Chair, for due process, I want to make sure that if Mr. Sullivan wants to respond to all that comment, that he is given that opportunity. That is provided by our rules, if he wishes to.
Yes, sir. Anything else, gentlemen? Mr. Sullivan, do you want to respond to anything? Okay. Good answer. All right, the motion on the table is to deny application 3348. All in favor of denying the application, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion is denied. Application 3348 is denied unanimously. So that dispenses with 9B.
Still have to bring it up.
Bring it up. You do have quasi judicial, so a little different. Legislative, you had a broader reach, but no doubt about it, this becomes moot because you now have inconsistency. So you don't have the land use, you can't do the zoning.
All right, well, 9B is quasi judicial, so before we bring it up, I have to ask if you've had any conversations from outside interests on this issue. Mr. Sullivan?
Other than messages that some of us have received? No.
Mr. Dance?
No, sir.
No,
Ms.
sir.
Pennington? Mr. O'Brien?
No, sir.
And I have not either. Okay, quasi-judicial, application number 3349, request to rezone from RC Residential Limited Commercial to C2 General Commercial and Shopping Center, District for 5276 and 5288 North Ocean Shore Boulevard. You have nothing to say? That's all right, that's all right. It's moot, I mean,
Yeah, same property stays the same,
all
the
the same.
details stay the same. Your three options now are not the same because now you really only have one. So,
Yep.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Just make a motion to deny application 3349, item 9B.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to deny application number 3349. Open it up to the public. Anybody in the public wish to comment? Seeing no one approach, I bring it back to the commission. Any other comments, commissioners? If not, all in favor of denying application 3349, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion passes unanimously. 9C, legislative, application number 3350, future land use map amendment from mixed use, low intensity, low medium density to commercial, high intensity at 5358 and 5364 North Ocean Shore Boulevard and 93 and 95 Sanchez Avenue with the associated parcel numbers. Adam?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one's a little different location first. You do have commercial uses that are proximate, so that mixed use low, still the same, but now you have the C2 to the north. You do have a non-conforming gas station to the south. There was some discussion about that also at the planning board. What if happens? So if things are non-conforming and something happens to them, they go away, or they get rezoned along with a future land use amendment because gas stations are problematic. They're not allowed in RC. So while we may say RC or C2 bad, C2 still good because you need it in a couple of places because it's the gas stations of the world. You can't have them in RC. Not dissimilar from the other parcel except for that. And so that's the one piece that's really different here. That's what the planning board had looked at and said, okay, I've got something a little more unusual with this. And that specific to the land use, that's why I think they came back with this one and had a different recommendation than the others. Still wanting to have the decision by the Board of County Commissioners on the policy on the native vegetation coastal area development. And so here, not dissimilar, again, going through the math here, the data, what we look at if we don't have something as a submittal, so we have the worst case that's here. And again, to emphasize for the record, the applicant does not have to identify a use. We are not doing a PUD. There is not a site plan that's required. But then the board has the prerogative, to deny the application. And so that is your prerogative, especially for a legislative request like a future land use amendment. So here, scenario, decrease 2,000 square feet. If we're just looking at the 10,000 versus the 8,000, less people here. Increase in the trips, again, the worst case applying then the scenario of the convenience store. We're using the worst case there. Again, probably not true, but it is what we have to do. 223.6 gallons increase in potable water demand, 78.88 sanitary sewer demand increase, 10.2 pounds per day on the solid waste side, 10 less persons for parks and recreation, less students, almost a full student less because of the population difference. So this one is right at half acre in size. Again, we have that juxtaposition with a mixed-use loan, what it allows versus the change to commercial high intensity. No intended use, again, it's proximate to those commercial uses. This one has that C2 zoning, but still has mixed-use low across the frontage on A1A. We do have this linked to that next rezoning application, 3351. And then the board's action from the planning board saying, hey, we're okay with this, but we do want to have some clarity on that language. Within the coastal area, development in areas of native vegetation will be limited to low-intensity mixed use or low-density residential. I'll tell you that the change that had happened was to the definition of coastal area that we did in 2011. But it is a little problematic to me to look back that policy, and that was likely there all along. So I don't know how we've done what we've done with that. So it kind of calls into question potentially Publix. But I will just let that stand. That wasn't this board, that was another board. I guess also we'd be questioning C2 zoning for Publix because it's not an interchange, but that's okay. And so then applicant requested continuance the same as the previous applications to the January board. So with that, you do have the three options as you had before: approve, deny, or continue. Approval being that you find it consistent with the comprehensive plan, denial being that you find it inconsistent, and then tabling or continuance would be to a time and date certain. We would still have to do public notice. Thank you.
Well, it's interesting what the planning board did. What they did was punt it to us, is what they did. And I think the issue that they used to punt, Commissioner Dance has very eloquently explained. So they should have said no, but that's all right. Mr. Sullivan, you care to take the podium or not?
Only for a brief moment. But rationale stands the same as the last, I'm sorry, Vincent Sullivan, Chimental Law on behalf of the applicant. Rationale for this future land use amendment stands the same, and as Mr. Mingle and county staff have identified, this parcel of property is probably the most appropriate out of any of the parcels out there because it is sandwiched between those two already existing C2 uses, albeit the zoning's not correct. That Sitco is a non-conforming use, and the public set, this county is already rezoned across the street the C2 zoning. This is the quintessential clustering that we see in our comprehensive plan, and that's why we believe this parcel is ripe for a rezoning, and we would ask for approval. If this board's inclined to make a determination, our request for a continuance to the January evening meeting still stands.
Commissioners, questions? Ms.
Well,
Sullivan.
I just, the fact that this is a smaller parcel and where it's located gives me some pause as to the size you'll be able to put in there, but it seems like a lot of the same reasons as the last one.
Yeah, I agree. Andy.
Just a couple of things that Adam brought up was referring to Publix, and right, that was the last C2 rezoning. And I would just say, I think the heartburn is the fact that Publix did extensive work with the community, had a site plan, had a specific use, where these seem to be just the entitlement zoning, land use change zoning, without that specific. And I think that just is, that's the heartburn, is we don't know. It could be sold, there's no guarantees. And not to say that the C2, couldn't be appropriate, and maybe it's as that Treasure Coast Charette did, talked about more of a commercial zone. But it's just, and I think that's where the planning board talked about some of the compatibility issues. But the rest, other than Publix, the rest were all grandfathered in from prior when the zoning code came into effect. They were just old uses that were grandfathered in. So there's still that heartburn about the open-ended discussion that we're having. And not that it's like you said, it could be appropriate in other areas, Highway 100 or the corridors that Mr. Baer talked about, but in the hammock with a scenic corridor with an overlay, there's protections built in with the comp plan, coastal area, native vegetation. There's protections there for a reason.
Any other comments?
I think Commissioner Dance is spot on. So.
Yeah. All right, well, then I would appreciate a motion on this issue. Either continue, deny, or...
Chair, I'd like to make a motion to deny application number 3350 to amend the flume totaling from low intensity to commercial.
Could you repeat that? I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, yes, I'd like to make a motion to deny application
Okay.
3350, the flume amendment totaling 0.46 acres from mixed-use low intensity to commercial.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to deny application 3350. Now open it up to public comment. Anybody in the public wish to comment? Yes, Ed.
I remain Ed White from 27 Ocean Street. Thank you again. Just a couple of quick things. First, in terms of clustering of commercial, I think that's covered on the existing comprehensive plan where it's supposed to be in intersections with I-95. It's not the same in the hammock, and RC was created so it would not be the same in the hammock. In terms of public, and I'm being a little bit redundant with you, Commissioner Dance, Publix was something that the public, the residents of the hammock, dearly wanted and dearly needed a place to buy groceries. It was done in a very respectful way. We knew exactly what was going to be built, how it was going to be built, and so forth. If the owners of this property would come forward and say what they want to do, who knows, perhaps the residents of the hammock would rally around that and say, yes, that's something we want and something we need. And we'd be happy to make an exception for that purpose. But there's no idea. And if you just do a general blanket zoning change, you're setting a precedent that we should not set in a scenic corridor and in violation, in my opinion, of the zoning RC that we already have in the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Next speaker. Dennis.
Hello, Dennis Clark again. I live on A1A in the hammock. I don't want to belabor this because I know everybody wants to go home, but I thought, can we get the overhead working? I think you probably want to see this, just for the record. If we can't get it up on the screen, I'll show it to you.
We can see it. It was on our screen.
This is a. It is coming up?
It's on our screen. We had it.
I was looking up there. Takes a while? Okay, well, within 1,000 feet of this property, there are two C2 properties, one being the Publix, the other being what used to be the Wine and Cheese, which was previously a car repair shop. That's why it's C2. So the other properties, there are 23 RC properties. There are 61 rural residential properties and 13 mobile home properties. So you can see that the area is not heavily commercial in there. And trying to make it heavily commercial, we know what a problem that already is. So I just wanted you to be aware of that. And also the example of cutting the floor area ratio by 2,000 feet to 8,000 square feet would require 160 parking spaces for that for that building, so if that were a commercial building. So that's just an absurd example. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis.
Chair, before he walks off,
Yeah,
Mr.
Dennis,
Clark,
go back.
you have used some exhibits. Please make sure that you have furnished those to the clerk, please, so that we have those for the record. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair.
Next speaker.
Hi, my name is Leah Groom. I live directly across from the 3350. I live at 98 Sanchez. So I just wanted to bring up a couple of comments. Myself and a neighbor were the ones that walked around and did the petition, so we have close to 1,000 signatures. I can submit a copy, or I'm not sure if Mr. Clark submitted a copy for you to read the comments.
We have them.
All
We
right.
have them.
Another couple of points that I just heard regarding the native plants. I'm looking at the live oaks, the beautyberries on that property, so it would be quite a shame, not to mention the animals, the woodpeckers that are living there. Mr. Hutchinson had mentioned that he wanted to bring something good for the community. I find it a little strange, maybe slightly unscrupulous. I could describe it because I live right there. I've not had a questionnaire, a survey, a chat. The only thing that happened was he drove by and asked my partner if we wanted to sell our property. So there was no, goodwill coming from what he wanted to bring to the community. The Bartletts, I just wanted to also mention, although they're C2, they're acting as a residential commercial. They have commercial on the front and a residence on the backside. So they're actually acting as a RC, which works perfectly fine in our neighborhood. The special exceptions that were applied for, I went to all those meetings, and special exceptions were given to Bronx for a drain field. There's now there's parking all over. There's now a beer garden in the back. I'm not sure what will happen, what will become of that, but that was not for the special exception. It was for a drain field. So, of course, the C2 zoning would impact my right in front of me greatly. It's already, the Bronx already brings in, far more traffic into our little tiny dirt road neighborhood. This C2 would just bring noise, and not to mention timings. How would you regulate, time in a business? Could they be open until 2 a.m.? I mean, hopefully it wouldn't be a strip club, but, could they operate a strip club in the morning and not, impede our, time at night? I don't know. Just wanted to express, concerns of the neighborhood. So, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker. You have no approach, I'll bring it back to the commission. Any other comments on this? Seeing none, the motion is to deny application 3350. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Number 9D, application 3351, it's quasi judicial. Mr. Sullivan, have you received any communication on this?
No.
No,
Mr.
sir.
Dance? Ms. Pennington?
No, sir.
Mr. O'Brien?
No, sir.
And I have not either. Adam?
So like the other one, this one cannot then be any other option other than denial on this. And if I could say for the record, maybe some folks weren't here when Flagler Beach had a strip club. We don't allow strip clubs. So just so we can quit talking about strip clubs, we don't allow them. If you were here in Flagler Beach and you remember that, 05, it was a fun talk, we don't allow them. Thank you. Denial is the only option.
All right. Mr. Sullivan? You're good, huh? Okay. All right, well, I'll entertain a motion then to deny application 3351.
My night. I'd like to make a motion to deny application number 3351, the rezoning from residential limited commercial to commercial 2.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to deny application 3351. I'll open it up to public comment. Anybody in the public wish to comment on this? Seeing no one approach, I bring it back to the commission. Any other comments, commissioners?
No.
None will call the vote. All in favor of denying application 3351, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. 9E, quasi judicial. Application 3387, request for approval of a preliminary plat for Woodside at Ormond Station. Parcel number with a lot of numbers. The owner is U.S. Capital Alliance, LLC, Agent Allen Engineering Group, Inc. Options for the board, approve, deny, or continue. Adam?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This does have the quasi-judicial disclosures. I don't know
Oh,
if
it
you-
does. Okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Sullivan, have you received any on this?
No, sir.
Any? Ms.
No,
Pennington?
sir.
No?
No, sir.
And I have received none.
This one you saw previously back in September is its PUD iteration, so we show the property here, and this is that portion of the property west of the pond in this parcel, so you can see it right in the center. West portion there, the east portion is that portion closer to the wetlands. The plat's not going into that area, but you'll see it in greater detail in these next slides. So it's within that area, mixed-use low, part of the Hunters Ridge DRI. This had been part, I think, of our prior industrial development, and then in one of the last iterations of the development order, it was designated for residential after the county came back and said we don't need it for our public use site. Keep going through these a little quick. It's not part of a flood zone, flood hazard area, and then you can see then the areas of the soil that are concerned are to the east side of the parcel. Those are going to be preserved. Those aren't part of this plat. And so then that's also where you see that wetland slough coming in. So that's the same slough that runs generally from the northwest down to the southeast, part of what goes in and feeds into the Little Tomoka River and on into the Tomoka River eventually. So you have the plat sheets, one of 4 sheets for the plat itself, this being the preliminary plat. We do expect that the final plat will conform closely to this, and so known as Woodside at Ormond Station. The configuration of the lots then, and notice here, and I mentioned it when the PUD had come up, you have the 2 points of access. So things we're not having with this, we're not having the waiver of our secondary emergency ingress egress as we've had in other times before, even in a temporary fashion. You do have the two spots there of emergency ingress egress onto Airport Road. Configuration being something fairly typical to what we've seen before as far as the lot layout. You do have extra area with those corner lots consistent with what we have in Article 4 to give extra area for the side setbacks. You can see here the layout along with some areas for the bus stop, I believe, is going to be in that track that's closest to Airport Road, one of the items we had before that had come up. This again, that set aside the tract further to the east then, and even beyond this being where the sensitive wetlands are. You have the breakdown of the tracts A through M and their different uses, just including it here just for your reference, and so that they're all broken out. Biggest takeaway here is that there is no responsibility for maintenance or ownership on the part of Flagler County with these tracts. And then just to remind you about the site development requirements that are in play here with this development, 4,800 square foot lot size, a little smaller than some that we've had. Minimum lot width down to 35 feet. And again, that's measured as the minimum at the point of the front setback is how that's being put together there with that. And impervious lot coverage at 70%. So 21.24 acres in total, 63 detached single-family residential lots with a density of 2.97 units per acre. We talked about the wetland impacts before, and these, remember, are being mitigated through the conservation area that we took title to previously, so that they are allowed wetland credits through their permitting through the Water Management District. Again, minimization and avoidance is in play here with this, but remembering that each of these parcels has a bundle of uses, some entitlements that are associated with them. And so from a wetland standpoint, while they're still attempting to avoid, they are able to benefit from the credits that are available to them through the mitigation bank effectively that's created by the conservation parcel that was given to the county. Planning Development Board did recommend approval, and we do have, as I provided that handout to you, the City of Ormond Beach has filed a notice of noncompliance with the developer, making them aware of some issues. We're having a hearing on October 25th. County staff will be present along with the developer to talk with the city about that. Our biggest concern as it relates to this plat is the city's obligations to provide water and sewer to these subdivision developments. We had some questions that had come up before. Does this in any way affect your ability to take an action on this preliminary plat? And we believe the answer is no. That there are obligations that are out there already through our interlocals with the city that we believe they're still obligated to honor. Certainly we'll be talking about that with them on October 25th. But as it concerns this is an application that's been submitted to you for action with the presumption that the city would meet its obligations to provide utilities to this site. And so the three options presenting here: approve, subject to, and then there's conditions along with this: no construction to commence prior to issuance of a county land development permit, no final plat approval to occur until extension of that potable water and sanitary sewers installed and approved by the city of Ormond Beach as a utility provider. That's irregardless of the status on the notice of noncompliance. They are a utility provider here. They are not a city to us. They are a utility provider. We have to have that in order to sign off on that final plat. And then the final condition: any subdivision improvements not completed by the developer to be bonded or other surety provided consistent with the requirements of the Land Development Code and subject to the county attorney's review. You can deny this request, and I would ask that if you do deny it, provide reasons on the record for your denial, and then finally you can continue it to a time and date certain for perhaps the reasons related to the notice of noncompliance could be a reason for that. With that, I'll close. Wait any questions or comments. The applicant and the owners are present for any questions and perhaps a presentation on this. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, Mr.
Again,
O'Brien.
it might go to council or councils. If we did take action in a positive nature and approve this, does it diminish or impact our negotiations with the city of Ormond Beach?
The notice of noncompliance they filed does not inhibit your ability to act under your land development code.
I know, but that's not, that, I'm asking if it hurts us in a negotiating standpoint.
No, I don't believe so, sir.
Okay.
Our position wouldn't change. You remember, and I don't mean to bother you all with this, we went through the amendment of the Hunters Ridge DRI, and I'm sorry, I can't remember. No, the one we just, when we did the final revisions with you, I'm thinking it was maybe 4 months ago, 5 months ago?
Yes, that's right. Yep.
Is that right?
February 2023.
These very same issues were raised, and we explained very extensively for the record, and if anybody will want to know, if you need to know, I'll make sure that we have those minutes. I mean, it's not something I have at the ready, but all of those were addressed. And those would, to the best of my knowledge, speaking with Mr. Mengel, speaking with administration, speaking with Mr. Moylan, Mr. Lagasse, I don't believe that our position is going to change from that articulated during those hearings. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
So from that standpoint, there is nothing that inhibits you from acting, nor will it compromise, in my opinion, compromise our ability to address the issues with the city of Ormond Beach.
Thank you.
They might be mad at us, but
So we do, as part each application, the utilities have to provide a letter, and we have that from the Ormond Beach utility.
As I recall, we did have that for this. I'll let, yes, I'm seeing nods of affirmation from the applicant.
I mean, otherwise it doesn't go through if we don't have
That's right.
confirmation
That's
that
right.
there's a
Ultimately.
capacity and a willingness from the provider to.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
We've talked about this before, but you've assured us that you're going to have curbs, drains, and the water is going to go to the wetlands to the east, right? Isn't that's the plan still? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I worry about that. Water management. management. And although the lots are narrow, we talked about that before too, so. How about, I don't, refresh my memory on amenities. They're going to have access to a clubhouse or anything like that? I don't remember.
Yeah, this one, I think it's safe to say this is part of that common product we heard about, Ormond Station, so the branding that's there. And so that this will have that Ormond Station availability. And then I think right now also the master DRI, I think, is augmenting that in the short run, aren't they? I think maybe you can talk about that, because until those are built, you've got folks are paying into the master HOA.
The master, Ormond Station.
But identify yourself.
I'm sorry, Attorney Kim Booker, Booker and Associates, on behalf of the applicant U.S. Capitol. Ormond Station is part of an overall development in which they will have their own master association and will be developing their own amenities for that entire remainder of the subdivision. This particular site has 7.8 conservation acres that are on site, outside of the conservation area, that are on site, and there's also access provided to that. So there's an amenity. This will be, I think, a substantial step towards starting to connect these trails, hopefully, and being able to utilize the conservation element that's throughout the Hunters Ridge development. And all the stormwater is being designed with the curbs. That part of that is in your application here.
Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Commissioners, anything else? Then I'll entertain a motion on application 3387.
I'll make a motion to approve application 3387, request for approval of a preliminary plat for Woodside at Ormond Station.
Second.
Are we including the A, B, and C? Approve?
Yes, A, approve as listed with A, B, and C included.
Been moved and seconded to approve application 3387 with the three conditions for approval. Anybody in the public wish to comment on this? And no one approach, I'll bring it back to the board. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor of approving item 3387 with the three attached conditions, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing none, excuse me.
I'm a nay.
You a nay.
I'm a nay on that.
The motion passes 4-1. County Administrator, welcome back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back. I'll keep it really brief. I just wanted to thank the staff for filling in for me while I was out. Definitely appreciate the support and those that have reached out to me. And I can't say thank you enough, really, to Jorge and Holly, who helped hold down the fort while I was gone. So thank you.
Mr. Adid.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I wanted to just briefly mention on the beach projects, earlier in the meeting, you approved the Pebble Beach Village Staging Area Agreement. And that is a incredibly significant advantage for the beach project. It was very important that we secure that HOA's consent to use its beachfront property to stage equipment as well as to build the access road to the beach. And I just wanted to state on the public record just how much I appreciated working with them and getting through the issues and being able to resolve them in a way that was satisfactory not only to the county, but to the Army Corps of Engineers, the FDOT, the DEP, because, that's also going to facilitate the construction of the taper to the Gamble Rogers State Park, the taper of the sand renourishment. So I wanted to thank them. Also, I wanted to extend appreciation, recognition to the help of the property appraiser's office. There's a very complex piece of property directly across the street on the west side of A1A, right across from the Pebble Beach Village beachfront property, and that property was needed also for staging areas. It's very, you hear the words lawyers say title cloud, cloud on title. This was very cloudy. But we, thanks, by the way, to the staff of the city of Flagler Beach digging out old records, and the property appraiser's assistant, especially Todd Lagarci, with Mr. Gardner's support to clear up that title. And it proved to be that the eastern sort of half of the property belonged to FDOT. It was old right-of-way, and the west side of that property was city of Flagler Beach. And so we were able to secure, you don't have to vote on it. Those staging areas are being handled by those respective agencies. That is the granting of it for the project, FDOT on the one hand and the city of Flagler Beach on the other. This past Thursday, Flagler Beach approved transfer, temporary easement grant to the project for 25 of their properties, including Veterans Park, including this very southern end that I've described here, the Pebble Beach Village, and their cooperation has been very significant in moving the project forward. So I wanted to tell you that. Those were big lifts. Next, just to wrap up my report, at your next meeting, I'm going to be presenting you and we'll be discussing the situation concerning the PACE program. That PACE is a acronym for Property Assessed Clean Energy and describes a state-approved program for people to use the vehicle of special assessment financing to harden their homes, to, for instance, a re-roof or some hurricane doors, hurricane windows, and also for energy conservation, solar panels, things of that sort. There have been some issues raised with the program. There are some disputes concerning whether the program can operate in counties without an interlocal agreement, whether they can operate to obligate tax collectors and property appraisers without an interlocal agreement. And that has become a contentious issue that's being litigated in the courts right now. The Florida Association of Counties is developing a policy position on this issue. The draft of the policy position, it's gone through its committee. Now it'll go to the full Florida Association of Counties at its meeting in the middle of November. I'm not sure the date, November 16th. I can't remember. Some of you might be going and attending, where it'll be voted on as whether it's a priority of the Florida Association of Counties. Its position right now, as reflected in its most recent draft, is to require a PACE program to only operate in those counties where there is an interlocal agreement. So just real high level here, one of the reasons why that has posed a problem is that you have operating in a jurisdiction without permission, and that tends to raise a lot of concerns: control, accountability, how are we protecting our consumers, our residents, versus a situation where you have different standards across different counties because each one has an individualized interlocal agreement and additional requirements may be imposed so they're not uniform And it's harder to run a program when you have a variety of different standards that you have to comply with. We have not had a difficulty with this program in the county that's been brought to my attention. There have been just a couple of situations, but the challenge for the other local governments that are dealing with it is they want to make sure that their citizens are not overcommitting themselves on improvements which are funded by the special assessments. It is an incredible advantage to the individual that needs the improvements because they don't have to put any money down. They don't have to go through any bank review, lender review. As long as they've been current on their taxes for 3 years, they don't have any liens, they're able to get the financing for those improvements. The interest rates range up to 10%, and I've seen them as low as 5%. Some people are signing these for very long durations, 15 years. We have a number of them 15 years in Flagler County, so that means that that special assessment continues for that period of time. There are in some jurisdictions, they are writing these loans for 30 years. So the concern there is that the amount expended over the life of the special assessment may exceed the useful life of the improvement that's been financed by the special assessment.
Mr. Adid, I've also heard a lot of horror stories about the sales tactics of the contractors that are using this program. I've heard from a lot of the rural county commissioners of that. So I'm looking for. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm looking forward to that discussion.
That's quite right. I was going to actually put that as one of my highbrow points, that there is some concern about people not being adequately informed, not adequate disclosures. Now, I don't have any personal knowledge. I'm not telling you that I have any personal knowledge of those things because we haven't really encountered those here. What I'm doing is attempting to gather as much information as I can and provide it to you, and you can make the judgment of whether you support this proposed policy initiative that's being considered by the Florida Association of Counties or any other action that you feel we ought to take or no action. So I just wanted to let you know that's going to be at your next meeting. So it's not going to be an easy topic. It's going to be harder than a land use case, okay? I think, just because of the materials that I've had to digest on this. So I just wanted to let you know that, and I'll do the best I can to put a package together for you that's explainable and gives you enough data that you feel comfortable in being able to make a decision. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you. Now it's time for second community outreach. This 30-minute time period has been allocated for public comment on items not of the agenda. Each speaker will be allowed up to 3 minutes to address the commission. Speakers should approach the podium, identify themselves, and direct comments to the chair. George.
Yes, good evening, George Mayo, Palm Coast. I'm glad Mr. Hadid brought up the problem with the PACE program. Just within the last week, I saw a national news program talking about the PACE program and the problems with it. One woman, elderly woman, needed a roof, and they came and said, "Oh, you need a roof." And all of a sudden, her tax assessment was so much that she was about to lose her house through tax assessment. This is the second time I've seen a major news program talking about the problems with the PACE program. I know we've had it before over many years. I haven't heard any trouble, but I think I was going to bring it up anyway. I'm glad Mr. Hadid has. This is something that really, really has to be looked into, having seen what it's all about and the people that were being abused by it and the wording in the contracts that they're forced to sign to get their free roof, free windows, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you very much.
Thank you, George. Next speaker. Yes, sir.
I won't speak the whole time, but since I'm still here, I might as well talk a little bit. So, again, my name is Alan Sandiford, 14 Treetop Circle. And I just wanted to finish a little bit of what I was saying before about the proposed development with the 3 and 4 story, high-density, 200-unit apartment complexes that are, you know, they're trying to get a piece of property rezoned, and that would go in Treetop Circle. It's a 2-street small subdevelopment of Plantation Bay. And of course, we have the commercial development that just came in where they took the trees right up to the back of all the properties that, I mean, you could basically just, if they open their front door, you look right out the back and you see a 3-story right through the house out the back windows. And this would be the other side where these 3 and 4 story apartment complexes would be right up against the properties of these people in the other house right there. And I just wanted to say that these people in the neighborhood are really going through a lot right now with what happened on the one side of us, and then this would be going right over there. And I just feel like the infrastructure on Old Dixie Highway is nowhere near up to standard for the kind of high density that would bring. And I also don't feel like it's compatible with the area, because from the proposed layout, it looks like 60 of the units would actually be facing the high tension lines, which border the other side of this proposed project. And they said when they talked about it, we went to their presentation over at the other place there in Flagler, and they said that those units would be 75 feet away from the high tension lines. And I just can't imagine that, you know, 60 units of people with 4-story buildings are going to want to look 75 feet away from high tension lines. It just doesn't seem like it goes with the area at all. But again, there's no traffic lights, and coming into the parks there, we've got the 2-lane roads. You know, the density of traffic that's already happening at the Publix there and going through those state parks. The state parks they're a regional, state, and national treasure, and they're very unique, and we have to think about the future people that are going to want to come and enjoy those parks and the people that live in that area, because once the current developments are completed, which there's a lot of development going on in Volusia County and on Old Kings Road in Flagler, I just think there's going to be so much density from the traffic, and there's just, I don't see how those roads can handle putting a high density in there as well. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach, bring it back to the commission. Commissioners, reports or comments? Mr. Sullivan.
Yeah, I just had one item over the weekend. It was nice. I was able to attend the National Association for Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, Freedom Fund Awards Luncheon they have each year. And there were 5 awards given out, mostly associated with support for our youth and children in education. But I was mentioned as the awardee, but it was really to the county, and it was for community engagement on the part of the county with their organization. And I think that's always good to listen to that, because it's important. And right now we're involved with the George Washington Carver ILA Center, and a number of our social programs are involved in many ways. So it was nice to do that, and I just wanted to bring that back. It was really an award for the county.
Thank you. Thank you. Andy?
Just wanted to thank everybody for wearing their purple. It meant a lot to the Family Life Center. Since the beginning of October is always about pink. And also recognizing that Family Life Center was the recipient, I think I read, of about $26,000 from the Creekside Festival.
Creekside, yes, $26,000.
Which fills a significant gap in their funding this year. So that was great to see that, due to the crowds at the Creekside Festival, that they were able to pull that in.
Oh, it was.
So props to the radio station who did that.
Yeah. Ms. Pennington?
Yeah, just a go off what he said with Creekside. Got a lot of thank yous for county staff. They did an excellent job out there, and the radio station called to say it was just top notch.
I got a call too. saying
Yeah,
the same
so
thing.
very proud of them.
Yeah. Mr. O'Brien?
A couple things that I wanted to just express my support and sadness for the folks that were impacted by the tornado that hit our B section of Palm Coast last week. And at the same time, thank all our first responders and our emergency management personnel, Jonathan and his team, for being out there and working with the city to provide support and help to those folks as fast as we did. And lastly, one of the measurements of a good leader is someone that can be away and have the organization still run and run effectively, and that certainly has happened over the last few weeks with Heidi being out. And so I just wanted to thank her team, Jorge and Holly, and the rest of the senior management, the administration team for their teamwork and doing a good job. I never once, through all of that time, ever felt that we weren't in good hands. So thank you to all of you.
I second that. Well, it was well said, Donnie.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have nothing. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn.
We are adjourned.